Chapter 4804. For a time, within tens of thousands of miles, all the top repairs were silent. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly, then waved his hand, and Yanli enchantment protected the whole restaurant. Boom! The sound of the earth being torn. Then the pavilions overturned and shattered. In the very center of this violent martyrdom, only a restaurant stood upright and did not even suffer any damage. Cui Jing, who was fighting for wine, shuddered at the sight of the outside scene, but saw the sword Wushuang sitting against the window, still lazy, so he settled inexplicably and continued to drink. "Brother Jian, do you need me to investigate?" Chuanqiu whispered, ready to fight. Jian Wushuang heard the words and shook his head. "No, the troublemaking guys are here." As his words fell, a heavy object fell to the ground. "Run, why didn't you run?" The thunderous roar sounded. Outside the broken street, two skinny bodies fell into the gravel. A Yen Xian, like an angry king, stepped the two figures into the ground with bare feet. An uncontrollable mumble rang. Behind this Yen Xian, there are 5 Yen Xian, all with a dark face. "Damn miscellaneous things, can't you run well?" Withdrawing his feet, the Vajra-like Yen Xian took a grip in the air and held the thin neck directly, lifting him from the ground. The broken hair stained with mud covered his face, but he couldn't hide his pain. The thick blood flowed down the wound on his skin. Brother, I'm scared." Another leaner figure lay on the ground, hands helplessly shoving away the gravel, seeming to want to stand up. The skinny figure strangled by the neck, slowly and calmly, a pair of bloodshot eyes was lost. "Let my brother leave and I will follow you." The King Kong-like Yen Xian heard it as if he heard the most ridiculous joke, and said with a grin, "You are so miscellaneous, and dare to talk to the conditions of this forum? Go back with this seat, no one can escape." At the end of the conversation, his other big hand, like twisting an ant, carried these 2 thin bodies in his hands. "You are so miscellaneous, only for medicine." The thin figure heard this sentence, and the original godless eyes suddenly froze, and then, like a beast, opened his mouth directly to the ear of Yen Xian like the diamond. Boom! A slap in his face smashed into his face, and blood poured directly from Qiqiao, and he passed out in a flash. The King Kong-like Yen Xian disdainfully smiled, and then raised his hand to pick up another figure, and he had to leave. At the next moment, a very cold female voice resounded through the broken earth. "Let them go!" Jian Wushuang looked at it in a sound, and suddenly a look of surprise appeared in his eyes. It was a woman in a gray shirt who made a cold voice, whose face could not be said to be soft, but she was full of vigor and self-confidence. And this heroic woman is one of the only remaining 7 swordsmen in the troubled North Tiangxiansu. I saw several faces in Sand Devil's Cave, but I don't know where to go. But now, it is really incredible to see each other in this side of heaven. Jian Wushuang raised her brows slightly, already wanting to see what she was going to do next. After shouting that sentence, the heroic woman was not afraid, and her strong strength had already flowed around her. Carrying a thin figure, Vajrayana stood in place, and then slowly turned back. After he saw that she was a woman, her violent eyes were full. "Who am I?" It turned out to be a little girl's skin. Yen Xian, like a diamond, threw the 2 figures in his hand directly to Yen Xian behind him, and then rubbed his palms, and walked towards her without any taboo. A bit of disgust flashed in the eyes of the heroic woman, and then there was a thunder and a long sword without any signs. Na Yangxian's eyes narrowed, and his subconscious consciousness was able to escape the terrible offensive. But a very long and narrow blood mark almost cut his neck into 2 pieces. It was just this face-to-face room that gave him a heavy blow. This made him furious and waved his hand down. The sky dome suddenly collapsed, and an invisible giant palm hit the heroic woman. Her brow furrowed, and the whole figure was like a ghost, running at an unimaginable speed to the Vajra-like Yen Xian. The King Kong-like Yen Xian was horrified, and she stepped back and said in a few steps, "Crush me." With the explosion, the 5 Yen Xian behind him set off. Gathering the power of 6 Yen Xian, the unmatched Yanli cage appeared, and the terrible trend caused the ground to tear again. The originally fast-moving heroic girl was also affected, as if she were in a quagmire and she was a bit struggling. With one enemy against 6 Yenxian, even if her strength is at the peak, it is an impossible thing, let alone this state. 6 unmatched strengths lowered, letting her speak directly against the blood. Even if she had the heart, she was unable to return to the sky. Little Nyang Pai actually dared to hurt me. I will ask you today not to survive, not to die. The burst of drink resounded from the mouth of Yen Jing, who was like a diamond, and the chain of Yen Li surged between his palms, and he caught the heroic woman again. But at the next moment, a lazy voice suddenly sounded. It's really noisy. He turned his head subconsciously to the place where the sound was made, but he saw a black urn altar, and it smashed over. Boom! A dull voice sounded, and the fragrant liquor spread out. The urn altar directly tore the combined blows of 6 Yenxian and exploded heavily on Yangxian's face like Vajra. Then he fell to the ground with his head and simply passed out. It was just a hit, directly made a Yenxian lose his resistance. What kind of avenue is this? Holding a delicate hip flask in one hand and a 3-foot sword in one hand, the sword Wushuang walked slowly, unspeakable, free and easy. The 5 Yenxian stepped back at the same time, looking at him with vigilance. The heroic woman covered her heart and slowly backed away, looking at Jian Wushuang's eyes, only shocked and incredible. Who is your excellency? It is best to judge the situation and stop clashing with me from the Huozongzong. We will not blame anything that happened before. One of them, Jingxian Yenxian, though shocked Jian Wushuang's horror, was unkind. After all, in his opinion, even if Jian Wushuang is even more powerful, can it still be defeated by a dozen or 5? But soon, his thoughts were swallowed into his stomach, his eyes glaring to the maximum. Because he saw that he had a 4-spirit-like figure, walked out of the restaurant not far away, and stood behind the young man in turn. Chapter 48:05. Each figure is like Yuanzhu Yuezhi, full of domineering breath. In particular, that figure was dressed in extravagant clothes, and there were 8 rose feathers in the hair. The breath it exuded was already beyond his imagination. Conflict? Li Huozong? Jian Wushuang looked at him, frowning slightly. Are you also worthy? Suddenly, a flash of humiliation flashed across the faces of the 5 Yenxian. They are proud of the imperial sect gate from the fire sect, across several heavens, and accept the disciples. Although it is nothing in the big division, the top practitioners in the surrounding heaven are all proud of entering the Lihua sect. But at the moment, he was humiliated by the faceless face. That net face Yen Xianxiang endured the plan, and said in a deep voice, "You juniors should not be too angry, maybe we will meet again in the future." Jian Wushuang squinted at him, and then shot directly. An unmatched force of strength swept up, and the Yenxian who was lying on the ground and stunned to death was strangled to become a powder, and no point of Xianyuan was left. All Yenxian was startled. They never thought Jian Wushuang would kill a Yenxian without any signs. "Leave those 2 boys, I will let you go." Jian Wushuang looked at them softly. Jingmian Yenxian strongly suppressed the anger in his heart, knowing that he was hit by a hard stubble today, but even if he threw down the 2 thin bodies, he turned and left. The 5 Yenxian, like the 5 streamers, did not intend to leave this side of the sky at all. But the facts are not always as expected. Jian Wushuang raised his hand and threw the real sword to Chen Qing. Chen Qingxin understood, and there was a grin on the corner of his mouth, and his figure disappeared. To cut the grass and eliminate the roots to prevent future troubles. This is his criterion for doing things. But after a while, Tianjiao burst into screams. Jian Wushuang didn't care about those. He carried the hip flask, walked slowly, and finally stopped in front of the 2 thin bodies and crouched down. "Look up and look at me," he said softly. The dead fish-like figure moved hard, and then seemed to have exhausted all his strength, lifting his head. "Thanks, Master Xie." After uttering this sentence unclearly, he passed out. Shaking his head helplessly, Jian Wushuang stood up and looked at the heroic woman with a complex look not far away. "Come here, I have a few questions to ask you. Don't think about running away, you can't run away." With Jian Wushuang's protection, there is only one restaurant left in the mainland. At this moment, in the main hall of the huge restaurant, in front of a round table, sitting in 8 circles, Jian Wushuang sat in the middle, next to him, followed by Di Qing and others. The heroic woman had also been seated, and she glanced at him from time to time. The 2 thin and weak bodies sat opposite Jian Wushuang, with 2 eyes staring straight at the table. "Eat," Jian Wushuang said softly. After getting the allowed order, the 2 figures couldn't take care of anything, and swallowed directly. "These 2 boys, it seems that Mao hasn't even grown up yet? What are you doing running around?" Chen Qing looked at the 2 with some surprise. Jian Wushuang was also a little curious, and the 2 boys at the moment looked really immature. And the faces of the 2 are almost the same, just like twins. "Hey brother, it's delicious." The most immature face, and some silly boy holding a plate of dishes in his hand, he smirked. With a determined look, another kid with a slightly thick face, nodded incessantly, and then quickly stuffed all kinds of food into his mouth. Such 2 skinny guys ate up a table full of dishes at a rate of wind and clouds. But then there was another dish presented, unlimited for them to eat. Jian Wushuang did not speak, and has been watching the 2 of them with great interest for dinner. Although these 2 boys are not even ancestors, they have some realm foundations and should not be so dependent on food. But looking at their food, it seems like they have never had a full meal. I don't know how long after that, the 2 guys who ate madly finally stopped planning to eat again. I touched my belly subconsciously, and my eyes were firm and thin, and I stood up hurriedly, facing the sword Wushuang archery. "Master Cheng Fuse, our brothers have never had a full meal. It's the first time today, it's greatly appreciated." Another silly kid looked at his brother with a grin, and then recounted this remarkably. "I haven't had a full meal since birth?" Chen Qing was slightly surprised. The thin body nodded and said frankly, "Our 2 brothers are all alone. When we have a memory, we can only rely on each other and make it difficult to eat a full meal." Chen Qing asked again, "Then you are not honestly staying in your original place? What are you running for?" The thin body heard the words and scratched his head. "My brother is a fool of wits and chaos. I want to take him to see his brain." Such childish remarks made a few smiles on the scene. "Hey, my brother said I'm a fool, I'm a fool." The kid with a stupid gaze grinned again. As his brother said, "This kid is indeed a fool who is in a state of chaos." The thin figure scratched his head again, and finally said solemnly, "My name is Song Wuxin, and my brother is Song Wen. Here I thank several adults for their life-saving grace, which I will never forget." "Where are you going to take him for a look?" Jian Wushuang looked at him and then asked. The thin figure named Song Wuxin shook his head, and then said, "In the place where I lived before, there was a well-informed old monk who said that my brother's brain is innate and unwise, and there is no way to change it. But I don't believe I want to find a fairy and let the fairy see my brother." The fairy in Song Wuxin's mouth is Yen Xian. Looking at his still hopeful look, Jian Wushuang only sighed in his heart. The innate spiritual wisdom is not open, and it is in a state of chaos. That is to say, such a life should not appear, but it was born because of various opportunities. It is a pure white paper. This blank piece of paper that shouldn't have been born is innately missing, and I am afraid it is difficult to make up. Even if it is supplemented with some kind of supreme secret method, it will cover the original memory. But at least for now, even the essence of Jiuzhuan Dian Xian is helpless. In the end, Jian Wushuang still said, "If I say, the fairy can't heal your brother?" Song Wuxin stunned, and his eyes flashed a bit of loss, but soon he grinned again. "I can't heal a fairy, then I will look for another fairy, and keep searching until I find a fairy who can cure my brother." Chapter 4806. Jian Wushuang asked again, "Is it going on without aim?" Song Wuxin nodded. "Yes, I walked straight ahead until I found it, or I couldn't move." "Are you afraid of death?" Chen Qing asked. Song Wuxin grinned again. "People like us can earn an extra day, and life and death are things we can consider, not to mention, sometimes death is not necessarily a good thing." Chen Qing immediately shook his head and said, "No, 2 fools." The 2 of them, in front of this physique with great strength like a prison, seemed very embarrassed and pinched their clothing corners unwittingly. In the end, Jian Wushuang said, "This journey is not as simple as you think. If you can't even protect yourself with the easiest way, your end will never be better than today. If you didn't wait for me, you and your brother would have died long ago. Would you still live unharmed until now? If you don't even care about your life, then I advise you not to take your brother to death." Song Wuxin heard Jian Wushuang's words, and he was shocked, but then a bit of bitterness appeared in his eyes. "I also want to take him to live, but my natural talent is dull, and the control of Yan Li is so weak that I can't cope with the possible crisis." Jian Wushuang said softly, "Since the talent is insufficient, it will have to be compensated by the acquired day, or changed in other ways." "You, practicing sword?" Song Wuxin listened and hurriedly took down the short sword like a burning stick in his waist. He scratched his head a little embarrassedly. "I am not particularly proficient in kendo. This sword was picked up by me earlier to act as a defensive role." Jian Wushuang raised his hand to fetch the short sword, pulled out the scabbard. The blade was worn out. "I am afraid that some spirit beasts in ordinary heavens may not be able to kill. Just throw this sword," he said without looking up, then looked at Chuanqiu. "Chuanqiu, see if there is any real sword." Chuanqiu nodded and began to rummage through the ring quickly. Chen Qing, Chuanqiu, and Cui Jing were in that former heaven, almost looting all the heavenly treasures of the 6 Crow Emperors, and they were almost filled with a whole ring. Soon, Chuanqiu took out a real sword without a sheath and a black sword body directly from Neji, and handed it to Jian Wushuang. "The real sword is warm and does not appear cold. The sword body is completely black. Only the seal of the sword is carved with the word Tianji. It is a true treasure that is not weaker than Qin Qingpai's sword." Next, then Jian Wushuang directly threw the real sword named Tianji to Song Wuxin. He was shocked. Even if he was dumb and knew the weight of the real sword in his hand, he could not speak for a while. "If you want to cure him, you have to make yourself strong." Jian Wushuang looked at him, his eyes gleaming with a golden awe. Song Wuxin swallowed his throat and embraced the real sword tightly with his arms. Since then, for 7 consecutive days, no one has left this heaven. The reason is that Jian Wushuang has always taught Song Wuxin the most basic sword style and comprehend the sword meaning. "Brother Chuanqiu, I thought Brother Sword was a stranger, but now it seems to be approachable. You said I would ask him any questions about the realm. Would he tell me?" Above the eaves of the restaurant, Chuanqiu glanced at Cui Jing and smiled. "This kind of problem will naturally tell you that you will know when you get along for a long time. In fact, Brother Jian is not a person who is too cold and takes care of the people around him." Cui nodded, looking thoughtfully at the one that just stood, with a striking figure, and the light deeper in his eyes became firmer. 7 days, but flashed away. He opened his eyes slowly when the thin body gradually swelled with mist. "Let's go," Jian Wushuang said concisely, and after speaking the word, he turned to prepare to leave. With a thump, Song Wuxin knelt on the ground, facing his back, knocking heavily on more than 10 loud heads. With a stupid look, Song Wian, who only knew how to laugh, saw his brother kneel and hurriedly knelt down, also knocking more than 10 loud heads. "Adult, I have spent half of my life in Song Wuxin, and others have never granted me half of the favor, which has caused my brother all the hardships. But today, by the grace of a meal, the grace of a sword, the grace of a thought, Song Wuxin has nothing to offer. I hereby swear that for 10,000 years, no matter what the result will be, I will rush to the adults." "Mingdeng." Jian Wushuang did not look back, but released Yanli Qingfeng to hold up his brother. "Don't think too much. The reason why I do this is purely because of a whim, not asking for anything in return. As for you, let's live and talk." At the end of the sentence, Jian Wushuang's figure stopped again and walked away slowly. Song Wuxin went forward a few subconsciously, but eventually stopped at the same place and stopped moving forward. Then he leaned back and picked up Song Win, skimming towards the corner of the sky. Although staying in this heaven for 10 days, but a moment. In between, the heroic woman had to recover from the injury after a little recovery. But with the guards of the Qing dynasty, Qin Qing and others, she could not finally escape her. "Let's talk. Why did you go to Bai Shangxian's? Sword asked calmly without carrying both hands. The heroic woman's face was cold, but inexplicable anger appeared in her eyes. You'd better answer honestly, otherwise your ending will not be much better than the previous Yanxian. Chen Qing threatened coldly. The heroic woman snorted softly, even when confronted by Jian Wushuang, Yi Qing and others were not afraid. If you want to start as soon as possible, why bother to talk more? This is not like your style a while ago. As soon as these words came out, Yu read books www. Akanshu. Calm Jian Wushuang frowned. You answered truthfully. I will let you go once. Are you 7 swordsmen, going to the northern Tiangxian's? Is the town killing the sun? She sneered. Don't you think you're quite stupid about asking? Do you think I will answer? His mother, I must give you a lesson. Chen Qing exasperated, raising her hand to teach her. But immediately, Jian Wushuang stopped Chen Qing and looked at her. It is not of interest to me if your purpose is to kill the sun Mo, but I am interested in the kind of forces behind you. To the point, it will aim to assassinate the emperor. The heroic woman was shocked and flashed in a panic. You can go. Jian Wushuang opened her mouth, and then signaled that she could go. She was stunned, and apparently didn't expect him to let her go so easily. But the heroic woman did not hesitate too much, and she was ready to leave in a flash. Chapter 4807. Just as her body was about to leave, a voice put her back in place. Jian Wushuang suddenly realized something and said, Have you ever seen a girl with bells on her body? As soon as the words came out, there was a flash of anger in the eyes of the heroic woman. Isn't that with you? Have you seen her? Jian Wushuang asked. I've seen it. She gave me a dead hand not long ago, thinking I was dead, and disappeared after taking my things. Jian Wushuang only felt like a drum in his heart. Where did you go? This time, she didn't stay any longer, and her figure disappeared. It's a matter of the sky-shaped bone armor. Jian Wushuang can't calm down. Just as he was about to catch up, a subtle but clear voice rang in his ears. Demi Tian. The 3 words were imprinted on Jian Wushuang's mind, making him frown. Another unknown place. And is the silver bell, which bears the bone armor of the sky pattern, really there? In this vast domain, trying to find a person aimlessly is a delusion. But with a possible location, all goals are shortened. Although he was not sure whether the heroic woman's words were true, Jian Wushuang had already made a decision in his heart and went to the so-called Dami Tiantan. After all, the sky-shaped bone armor in Yin Ling's hand is extremely important to him. In this endless study of the great world, so far, the sky-shaped bone armor is the closest thing to Xian Yi, and it is likely to hide a big secret. So he must collect these bone armor as much as possible. After making up his mind, Jian Wushuang did not stay here, and immediately carried everyone back to the 6-day realm. The great division developed by the Emperor Zhenuyang, after many years of hard work, has swallowed several emperors in the ancient era, and their territory has become too vast, and I am afraid that there are few emperors' territory that can be used with it. Compared, even if Yanxian shuttles in the sky, it is quite a time-consuming thing. As a result, there are some magic circles between some super-celestial fields, and they can reach the designated place through the connection of Xian Wenyan. However, this kind of magic circle has the disadvantage of being unstable, so it is rarely used by Yanxian and honestly rely on its own strength to travel. After several years, the familiar 6-day realm came into Jian Wushuang's eyes. He looked back at the 4 godlike figures behind him, and then stepped into the realm of 6 days. Perhaps it was through the great changes in the Northern Celestial State, and the Northern Celestial State under the control of the Little Emperor was completely wiped out, and there was almost no vitality. Looking at the direction of Degushan, Jian Wushuang hesitated for a moment, and finally decided to return to Xiaogushan first. But when he entered Xiaogushan, Xiaodigen was surrounded by the thin purple robe, and it seemed that he had been waiting for a long time and greeted him directly. Swordmaster, Xiaodigen has been waiting for you for a long time, and come with me. He nodded toward Jian Wushuang, and then led forward. A line of 5 figures ran towards the most central hall of Xiaogushan. When the cloud and mist disappeared, Jian Wushuang's figure came to the front of the hall, and his eyes also looked at the square in front of the main hall. There he sat cross-legged in a thin figure. Seemingly, the pale emperor pale to the extreme opened his eyes, and after seeing Jian Wushuang he stood up directly to meet. But he hadn't walked 2 steps before falling back on the ground again. The thin purple robe hurriedly helped him up. "Brother Jian, I know you will come back," he said weakly. Jian Wushuang nodded. "Are you all right?" The little emperor shook his head. "It's okay, the whip is getting too much, it's all skin trauma." The thin purple robe added on the side. The emperor's anger was thoroughly investigated because of the matter of the 5 emperors, and the other emperors were lashed out for thousands of sticks for various reasons. The little emperor looked at him and whispered, "Brother Jian, the sun is dead." Jian Wushuang nodded silently. "I know, I was there at the time." He was slightly startled. "Brother Jian, who knows who killed him?" Jian Wushuang said, "I never knew that it was a mysterious person who broke the fairy source of the sun Mo. Brother Jian, can you find the sky-shaped bone armor you need?" Jian Wushuang shook his head. The clue disappeared again. "Don't say this, you go all the way and rest in the advanced palace," Xiao Dijuan said, and then looked at the 2 strange figures behind Jian Wushuang. "What are these 2? "It's 2 like-minded friends I met on the road, temporarily living next to me." The little emperor asked no more, and then led Jian Wushuang to the palace. The death of Gongzi Mo has so far left most of the major divisions in a dignified atmosphere. Although the emperor has not carried out a thorough investigation, I am afraid that for a long period of time, there will not be peace between the various heavens. Sitting next to Jian Wushuang, Xiao Dijuan analyzed, "Brother Jian, if the news or clues of the sky-shaped bone armor are interrupted, it is better to sit back and spend this period of time, the safest." What Xiao Dijuan said is not false. This time, all the way back to the 6th heaven realm, the atmosphere between the various heaven realms is already dignified, and there is a feeling of undercurrent surging. But Jian Wushuang couldn't wait. Once Yinling left the so-called demission, the clue of the word pattern bone armor that day was really broken. He has decided that after a period of rest, he will go to demission to find Yinling. The voice of the little emperor sounded. "Shortly after the death of Prince Mo, our emperor summoned us all to the heavenly court to thoroughly investigate all the news about Master Mo. It was also at that time that there were irresistible rumors that I killed the Sun Zmo, because before the northern celestial state was destroyed, a large number of Montenegro crystals appeared in the northern celestial state, www. Novel. I was lashed out for 4,000 sticks because of this." Jian Wushuang heard the words and moved his heart. He thought of the group of top repairers who sold Heishan Dingjing in Xianzhou when he first entered the northern celestial state. Chuanxiu almost died in the hands of a mysterious Yenxian. The Montenegro crystals flowing in the northern celestial state can already be sure that someone deliberately sells. And this matter can be known by Heaven Court and Zhenwu Yang, and there is only one possibility that someone intentionally spread it. The result also clearly achieved its purpose. The spears of the killing of the Sun Mo were all directed at the little emperor. Jian Wushuang did not intend to conceal, but even if he would be in the North Tiangxianzhu, he told the little emperor. "That is to say, before you entered the northern celestial state, did anyone else set up a situation that framed this seat? It really is a good deal." The little emperor's eyes were cold, but he was really angry. Chapter 4808. Jian Wushuang nodded. "It is already certain that the guys have done this for a long time. It seems that I can't succeed in killing me, and I've changed hands to kill other emperors," he sneered. "It's really a good plan." The little emperor asked again, "Speaking of it, did you say that the Sun Mo died in the hands of a mysterious woman?" Jian Wushuang nodded, but did not say Jing Ying's name. Being able to have such energy, and simply kill the Sun Mo, Brother Jian may wish to guess. Who will these guys send? Xiao Dijuan looked at him with a meaningful meaning. In fact, after the complete destruction of the northern celestial state, he had doubts that he was able to mobilize 2 great Yenxian, 7 extraordinary Yenxian, and the situation that brought disaster to the east. That is the mutual killing between their emperors. Little Emperor smiled. It seems that you have guessed Brother Jian, but without evidence, no one can guess who is one of our brothers. I just hate it now. Why wasn't the sun dying? This confusing situation is far from clear in 3 or 2 sentences, let alone the conclusion of the coffin. Otherwise the heavenly court will find out who the real murderer is. Jian Wushuang does not plan to continue this topic anymore. After all, there is no nutrition. After pondering over and over again, Jian Wushuang still made up his mind and looked at the little emperor said, "Do you know who is the domain of the heavens controlled by who?" Little Emperor raised his eyebrows, his face was strange. "Brother Jian, what do you ask about this?" Jian Wushuang said, "Because, I heard the news, it is very likely that the sky-shaped bone armor is in the sky." He said in a meaningful way, "This big Mitian, by the way, you must be familiar with it, it is the domain of the jurisdiction of the second emperor. The sun is in charge of the heavenly domain, Damiantion?" For a time, Jian Wushuang's brow furrowed slightly. The second emperor of the imperial prince was the one who was defeated by Jian Wushuang in the battle for the peach. In some ways, it would be a headache to have a hostile opponent like a son. Judging from his style of doing things and his determination, the meticulous character is a very difficult opponent. What's more important is that he has endless means. No matter how bright or dark, he can inadvertently injure his opponent. Originally, Jian Wushuang planned to reduce the conflict with him after the dispute between Xiantao, but now he knew that the place where Yinling might go was actually the domain of the master. This is even more tricky. I am afraid that he will appear in the domain of the sun's correction by then, and he will be directly killed. At the same time, Jian Wushuang felt weird. It was clear that Yinling was the woman of the sun's ink. Why did he escape to the heaven of the sun? Look at the heroic woman when she left. It didn't seem to be lying. The news of the sky-shaped bone armor is very likely to be true. Brother Jian, do you plan to go to Damition? No, I disagree. Xiaodajan frowned. In this kind of node, even if you can safely reach Damition, Gongzi Jiao is likely to find it in the first place. Once discovered by him for the holiday between us, I am afraid. Jian Wushuang is also worried about this. Gongzi Jiao is definitely not a good fellow, even terrible. If it is discovered in the so-called Damition, it is definitely an endless situation. But he has no retreat. One of the most important reasons why he came to Daanhuan was to find Xian Yi and Lao Zun to unravel the secrets that had bound him. At the same time, there are also secrets about the divine realm of the early days and the divine universe. With the growth of his own realm, he originally thought that there is no secret divine universe, but it is still somewhat secret. Those gods who had seen him in the mournful place for so long did not know how long they existed. Why did they fight? That was like a shocking appearance. Who was the old man who stopped Jian Wushuang when he was going forward, and why did he disappear in the end? And that one of the extreme seas, Lao Zun, which does not belong to the divine universe, is silent in the divine universe. The most important point is what kind of existence of divine power, and whether the universe he once was a reincarnation. These are probably only known by finding Xian Yi and Lao Zun. Right now, the sky-shaped bone armor is the only clue that must not be broken. Even if the gigantic ruler is the Emperor Zhenuyang, he must go there. I've already thought about it, I have to go to the last one anyway. Jian Wushuang looked at Xiaodi Jundao. Really? Really go? Then I will go with you anyway this time. Jian Wushuang shook his head. In order to avoid exposure, this time I plan to go forward by myself. But nobody cares for you, isn't it more dangerous? Xiao Dijuan frowned. Let's talk about it later, I plan to take a break. Jian Wushuang said, but you can't go with me anyway. The problem is even more difficult if it is discovered. Little Emperor knew the benefits, and finally sighed helplessly and got up and patted him on the shoulder. Brother Jian, you have a good rest for a while, then I will discuss some things with you. As the figures of Xiaodajan and others left, Qin Qing, Chuanqiu and others who had been eavesdropping outside the hall flooded into the hall. Brother Sword, are you going to the Laozi again? Bring me Qin Qing, be sure to worry free, even if the sun corrected me, I must honestly bow my head. Qin Qing grinned excitedly. Chuanxiu immediately said, "There is also my brother. I will go with you too, there is a mutual care between each other. Since you all go, then I will follow." Cui Jingfu agreed. Jian Wushuang was helpless. "Be quiet first. This time is not like the one in Baishangxiansu. I have to deal with the sun's correction, and I am looking for something, not revenge. Qin Qing, your figure is too prominent to go. If I am not wrong, in spring and autumn, there is a condensed source between your eyebrows. It should be promoted to Yanxian soon. Just stay in Ziyushan and break through." At this time Qing, who had been silent, said suddenly, "This time, let me go with you." Jian Wushuang glanced at him, and it seemed that only Qing Qing was the most suitable candidate. Being Jiuzhuan Dian Immortal, even against ordinary Dian Immortal, is the existence that will easily crush it. With the essence of Qing as a guarantee, I am afraid that only Heaven's court can move him. Then Jian Wushuang nodded, confirming the candidate for this day. Chapter 4809. Under his decision, Qin Qing stayed behind for 6 days. Because Chuanxiu and Cui Jing, after stealing a lot of gems pills sealed by Emperor Luyao on the road, they have been promoted to different degrees. Also let him stay behind. This time he went to Demetian under the control of Gongzi Deng. Jian Wushuang only decided to move forward with the meaning of Qing. After making a decision, he went to the square outside the hall to recuperate and recover. Qin Qing and others also set their own interest rates. Since the collapse of the North Heavenly State, the trauma to them has been so heavy that they have not recovered their strength after returning to the 6-day realm. Without the inheritance of the 6 Crow Emperors, Jian Wushuang's strength will certainly not return to its peak. Now, he said that it was nursing and recovery. In fact, he has already begun to investigate the 6 Crow heavenly scripture that was stored in his body and in his consciousness. Di Qing followed behind him incessantly, and the longing that could not be concealed in his eyes almost overflowed. Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly and did not care about him, and proceeded to explore the 6 crows. Tai Qing also became nervous and concentrated, even more tense than him. At this moment, Jian Wushuang, who seemed to be an old monk in his mind, suddenly came slowly. "What is your relationship with Gongzi Mo?" Di Qing stunned, then reacted after a while, and said after a moment of contemplation, "Actually, we are a kind of interest relationship, but it is far from being a friend. After all, we all take what we need." Speaking of which, Di Qing touched his nose a little embarrassedly. "He wants my protection, and I want some luck from his emperor." "Yongzi Mo's emperor? Zhenwu Yang's luck, what to do?" Jian Wushuang looked at him. Di Qing did not conceal anything. "Every Chinese New Year, Master Z will give me a ray of Emperor Wiang's luck for me to understand, but it has little effect. To that mysterious emperor is lucky." Jian Wushuang heard the words and said, "Is the emperor above the 9-turned Dian Immortal?" Di Qing shook his head. "Emperor also belongs to the realm of Dian Immortal, but Dian Immortal is by no means equivalent to the emperor, and it can even be said to exist in two completely with the emperor. If you want to become an emperor, you must understand and derive your own emperor's luck. Only then can you create a heavenly court and control the avenues of countless heavens. I've been trapped in Jiuzhuan Dian Immortal for a long time, and I will soon forget the beginning." There was a flash of fatigue in his eyes. "If I don't say it, I'm afraid you won't believe it. I'm actually the same era as the Emperor Zhenwu Yang of this big sect." But he realized and derived the emperor's luck during the 5th turn of the Dian Immortal, and I was trapped in the 9th turn. Speaking of which, he sighed. After listening to Jian Wushuang, he probably understood a little bit, and said slowly, "The practice is the way to the end. The cultivation is only the perception and control of the heavenly path and the luck. This mysterious and profound thing is far from being understood by talent. The only thing I can do is to feel, to be appropriate. Although I said a little empty, but this is the case. Your word, your luck, maybe one day in the future, it may come to your mind." The meaning was silent. He began to relive the meaning of Jian Wushuang's words, and seemed to be thinking about something. Jian Wushuang no longer speaks much, sinking into contemplation and beginning to conquer the six-crow heavenly emperor in his consciousness. This six-crow heavenly emperor text is the last sentiment inheritance of the six-crow emperor. It is absolutely impossible to say that the sword is unparalleled. He has an intuition, even if he realizes a point, it will be a tremendous change for now. But to realize that this kind of thing is not to invite guests to dinner, as a matter of course, it contains unknown big variables. This is Jian Wushuang's first contact with the Emperor's Avenue, and it is naturally very nervous. In divine consciousness, the six-crow heavenly emperor presents a unique huazi, which gives life a sense of awe and pilgrimage, and reveals a breath of antiquity. Jian Wushuang was transformed into a fictitious form, walking in the sky of his consciousness. After nearly 10 million years of practice, he has gradually grown from the end of the day to the present, and his consciousness has already reached perfection when he was at the ancestor level, becoming a sea of ever-changing sky. In his vast immense consciousness, he can go to the corner where he wants to go in a flash. The six-crow heavenly scripture occupied more than half of the space in his consciousness, resembling a flying bird sleeping in the clouds. And the closer to the realization, an unbearable blaze swept through, burning all the clothes worn by Jian Wushuang's phantom, exposing a solid chest. After his arm, which was cut off by Emperor Six-Crow, was remodeled, a terrible breath flowed under the skin of the entire arm, as if dark blue blood was flowing. At the same time, Jian Wushuang also felt that in the divine universe, the blood of the ancestor and phoenix left by Feng Qi, the ancestor of the Feng ancestor Feng Qi, had become full from the original decline. Everything seems to be done by the figurative six-crow heavenly emperor. Jian Wushuang was naked with his chest, and the long hair tied behind him broke through the belt, and flew in the air, and the sacred lines of the gods flowed in the hair. He walked slowly, facing the dim cloud that was falling asleep, with a magnificent look, and reached out with a finger. In an instant, the mountains and seas were wiped out, and the sun was dying, and the entire sky of consciousness set off an immense momentum. Then the misty cloud became a bird. The dark cyan bird has a hexagonal head, each corner is a different color, magnificent and mysterious. It opened its eyes, and the pure golden pupil seemed to see Jian Wushuang through. The eyes are opposite, as if separated by a whole period of time, with a barren, ancient silence, making him unbearable. He feels that every cell and pore in his body is under a heavy load, and he can't bear to fall apart. Go home, this is not the luck you can control today. You can have it only when the sea is full of dust and the catastrophe is coming. The bird with a hexagonal head and billions of rose feathers, looking at Jian Wushuang, said the truth. At the moment, Jian Wushuang, who is suffering, can't speak. He can't move at all and can't move. His whole body is completely captured by that kind of breath. A whiff of sensation of breath, like nothing, wanted to get into his body desperately. At this moment, he just couldn't run. Chapter 48:10. That is, at the same time, Jian Wushuang's real body suddenly showed an unimaginable and terrifying luck. The truth of sitting and thinking hard next to him was startled. Then Qing came back to his eyes, and his eyes were extremely hot. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's body was surging with an unknown breath. It was very breathtaking, and it was exactly the same breath as the six-crow emperor in the former heavenly court. I Ching was suppressing his inner restlessness, but soon his heart forced him to extend his hand to Jian Wushuang. With only one breath, just one breath. He murmured, and then leaned close to Jian Wushuang's real body. At the next moment, he looked blue and purple instantly, only to realize that the true power in the meridian inside the body was ingested by some unknown power. At the same time, his meridians couldn't bear that kind of tearing and collapsed. As a 9-turned day fairy, almost at the top of the fairy body, can't bear this power, then this power can only be the breath of the emperor. Jian Wushuang. Wake up soon. Di Qing hissed, and blood was pouring from his pores. Sword Wushuang in his own consciousness is also suffering at the moment. He is completely unable to control himself, and can only let all kinds of breath flow into his body. The flying bird with a hexagonal head couldn't calm down either. A pair of golden eyes shot directly out of Huang Huang Jinwei, instantly cutting off the weird suction on Jian Wuxuang's true shadow. Then the flying bird opened his beak and spit out the prestige, and expelled him directly out of the consciousness. After the sword Wuxuang's real shadow completely disappeared, the flying bird relapsed into silence, and the streamer emitted by the 6 crow heavenly characters slowly circulated. Out of the sky, Jian Wuxuang violently opened his eyes, and swallowed one's strength. He only felt the pain of the tears of the mind, and then passed out. The meaning around him, the breath has already languished to the extreme, bitter, bitter me. The coma took a full year to wake up. Originally thinking that Wuji Wuxuang would wake up afterwards, and did not find any harm to himself. Instead, he was full of strength, and the realm was firmly at the peak of Yanxian. It's just that the clear breath around him is a bit weak, like the stage of slow recovery and slow recovery. Jian Wuxuang didn't care. Since the 6-raven heavenly emperor was not something he could touch today, he wouldn't touch it, but set about preparing to go to demission. "Are you okay? How did you make this look?" He curious as he looked at the faint breath. Di Qing shook his head again and again. "I'm fine, I just suffered a little injury." Jian Wuxuang nodded, no longer asked, prepared for the next few days. In the spring and autumn period, 1,000 pieces were screened, and the peculiar pill, which was collected by Emperor Luyao, was put into the Neiji and handed to him. "Brother Jian, you must bring these. All of them are selected by the 3 of us in the collection, and each one has a magic effect." Jian Wuxuang nodded and took it, and the Dimitri where the young sun corrected was bound to be 100 times more dangerous than the northern heavenly state of the young sun. According to the sun's calm and cautious temper, I am afraid that the entire sky is like an iron barrel. These rare pill treasures collected by Emperor 6 Crow may play a key role at a certain node. And Brother Jian, since we cannot follow you to that big sky this time, we will not be idle. Chuanqiu, Qin Qing, and Cui Jing followed the words of Jian Wuxuang. "The 3 of us intend to set up an auction house outside these 6 days. Auction house. Jian Wuxuang heard the words and suddenly couldn't cry or laugh. "Why, how many of you still lack money? Can you spend those mountain-like black mountaintop crystals?" Chuanqiu heard that and scratched his head. It's just one aspect of opening an auction house in these heavens to sell something. The more important thing is to exchange things for things. The treasures we searched in that heaven were too many, but there are nearly half of the treasures of heaven and earth. Instead of keeping them, it is better to exchange something that can benefit Brother Jian. The best of all. Jian Wuxuang only understood this when he heard this. The auction house that Chuanqiu, Qin Qing, and Cui Jing wanted to set up was all prepared for themselves. Even if they shook their heads, spring and autumn, I have no opinion about setting up an auction house, but be sure not to take out too many treasures at once to avoid contaminating some unnecessary troubles. Also, you don't have to be the treasure that you can get for anything for your own sake. You only need to use it for yourself. Improving your own strength is the top priority. Qin Qing grinned. "Brother Sword, you can rest assured, this time the auction house was built by me personally, without relying on any one of the heavens. Then I will call some old brothers to station. Even if the real Wiang Emperor came, I have to honestly pay me a head fee." Chuanqiu also smiled, adding, "Brother Jian, anyway, you will be the master behind our auction houses in the future." Jian Wuxuang couldn't cry or laugh. "It's up to you to do everything." After 10 days, Jian Wuxuang ran to meet Tian with I Ching. As he was about to leave the 6-day realm, the little emperor gave him a gold and jade bicolor ring. Then he told him, "Brother Jian, you have to remember that demission is no better than the northern celestial state, and Gong Zhijiao has always had the heart of a male, and his means are also 100 times stronger than that of Gong Zmo. I also heard that he has the presence of Dian Immortal under his seat. Even if the situation is urgent, you must not fight him in Dei Tian." Jian Wuxuang took the ring and nodded. "I remember." The little emperor stepped forward again and said in a deep voice, "If Brother Jian has any trouble in Dami, I will inevitably be buried with my son." Jian Wuxuang was slightly uncomfortable and then said, "Relax, I will be fine, and I will come back when I find something. The little emperor nodded and said, when that ring is key has a great effect, and it should not be used unless it is absolutely necessary. He nodded, and then carried the meaning of Qing, turning into 2 waves of fright and plunging into the void. Your Highness, we should go back. The thin purple robe bowed his head. The little emperor did not answer, his eyes were dignified, and he said in a long while, Ma'am, who do you think the person next to him will be? I didn't know it, but it must have been in his eyes. It must be not ordinary people. Really? Why do I think he has a very familiar feeling? It's strange. The rapid gang wind wanders in the void, and even the stars can tear. The non-ancestral top repairs across the heavens can cross that gang wind, and only Yenxian can resist it for a long time, traveling through the heavens and the world. There are 2 figures, just like Jinghong passing through hundreds of millions of voids in a flash, swimming in boundless territory. These 2 figures are Jian Wushuang and Qin Qing. Chapter 48:11. Jian Wushuang is completely blind to this entire division. Obviously, Qing Qing is no better than him. Although he was in the same era as Zhenliang, he did not know what happened, so that he did not understand the entire big domain. This time, because there was no way to lead Qin Qing, Jian Wushuang only knew the general direction of Dami Tian, but did not know where the shortcut was. Otherwise, let's try the so-called teleportation fairy array. Jian Wushuang looked at Di Qingdao. Transfer fairy array? Isn't it the formation that Zhen Weiyang had built before the annexation war? Di Qing thought for a moment. Yes, I still believe in that kind of fairy array, used to communicate the strength of the various heavens. As long as the immortal pattern is perfect, it can carry nearly 10,000 monks. Jian Wushuang nodded. Let's try it. In order to hide his whereabouts and not be suspected by others, he has been traversing rapidly from the 6-day realm to nearly half a year. He and his 2 talents came to a remote realm that had a fairy array. Looking at the more than 10 famous practitioners who were stationed in the immortal array, who were sleeping soundly, Jian Wushuang stomped the void with his feet, and suddenly the momentum was lifted, and the more than 10 famous practitioners were all lifted up. Who? The gray-faced man awakened from the void, and a leading young man shouted, Hey boy, where can you reach this fairy array? Di Qing asked in a deep voice. Because the facial features of Di Qing are too 3-dimensional, even if you don't need to release the power, you only need to frown your brows to reveal a terrible momentum. The top practitioners who had planned to rely on more people to suppress him were also inexplicably honest. Seeing Jian Wushuang, he directly reached over and threw a small bag of Montenegro top crystal. The leading young man's eyes were suddenly glorious, and all his previous unpleasant faces disappeared. Good Lord, our Shanghai Immortal Array was built by the Dian Immortal under the seat of the Emperor Wuyang, and has an ancient history. You can go wherever you go. There are heavens in the way, Tian Itian, Luohai Tianyu, and Qin Qing Tianyu. Looking at the young man with the same name as the top chef, Stop, you can say if you can reach Shanghuang Tianyu. Shanghuang Tianyu is a heaven close to Domitian without any association. During this trip, Jian Wushuang asked Xiaodijin and others first, so he became familiar with it. Shanghuang Tianyu, that hasn't been a place where monks have been to in a long time. There was a reminder of a short stature repair, but he was quickly glared back by the young top repairer. Then young Dingxiu quickly put the top of the black mountain into his arms, and then nodded, I can go. Of course when I am, the 2 adults are at ease, standing in the middle of the fairy array, and they will arrive as soon as they open their eyes. Jian Wushuang and Yi Qing looked at each other, and then walked towards that fairy array. The fairy array approached the sky in the form of eyes, condensing in the void, emitting an ancient halo. In the eyes of this fairy array, there are nearly 100 thick fairy lines flowing, which is not bad. 2 adults stand firm. The young man led by the head shook his arms, and suddenly a strong force turned into a stream of light and poured into the fairy array. Combined with the strength of the top 10 repairs, this ancient immortal array rotates, and between the immortal patterns, the figures of Jian Wushuang and Di Qing disappeared directly. Ooh! The young man breathed heavily. Boss, I am afraid that this magic circle is going to go up and down a bit, and the Xianwen should not be able to support it," said the little Dingxiu again, and there was a worry in his eyebrows. The young man Dingxiu immediately said, "Nonsense, I am sure I can't reach the wasteland. The fairy patterns of the fairy array are broken in half, and can they be sent that far? If that fairy array breaks up halfway, I am afraid they will all be hit hard. I had expected that I would throw them into the nearest sky in advance. They can't stand it. At most, they will get lost. And looking at the appearance of the two of them, I certainly don't know that Shanghuang is in a mysterious place. Without earning them, I will have trouble sleeping and sleeping." As the stream of light in front of them disappeared, the two people stood in a pretty mysterious landscape. "It's so fast? It doesn't seem to even have 10 breaths. Jian Wushuang was a little surprised. This fairy array was too fast. Di Qing is also a bit surprised at such a speed. It is really good. Jian Wushuang returned to his mind and looked at this energetic, mysterious mountain forest with some wonder. According to Little Emperor, the wilderness near Dami can be regarded as a rough place, endless flying sand and stones, and bad weather, even if Yanxian is not willing to stay. It was the main battlefield where the Emperor Zhenliang fought against another emperor. The power of the emperor turned the entire heaven into nothingness. In the end, Zhen Weiyang, who won the battle, reconstructed the celestial realm and named it a wasteland. However, the heaven at the moment is completely different from the Shanghuang described in Xiaodi Junkus' mouth, and there are even two kinds of existence. Is this really a wasteland? Jian Wushuang was a little puzzled, but naturally no one could answer him, because Di Qing was also in a daze. It seems that the environment here is quite good, and there should be a top repair or Yanxian living. Find the monk and ask first. Jian Wushuang made up his mind in his heart, and then asked the way forward. The mountains and rivers of Sai live together, and the water and grass are luxuriant. As Jian Wushuang searched for the monk's trail 1,000,000 miles away, the clouds of the heavenly skies suddenly forced her to become dark. At the same time, the mountain forest that was originally like a fairyland was suddenly dimmed by the change of clouds, and the cold wind burst. What's the situation? Jian Wushuang frowned, then signaled to Qing Qing to hide his breath together. Soon after they concealed their breath, strange smiles resounded from Shino, and finally gathered in the forest. Ji Jie. With this weird smile resounding a few moments later, from this forest, more than a dozen strange shapes appeared from far and near. Each of these weird physiques is tall and sturdy, each of which is a few feet tall, with an ugly face, black body, eyes and thick canine valgus at the same time, quite like a skinned monkey. These more than 10 ugly faces are all jumping forward. Even if they are ugly, they cannot stop the smiles on their faces. If you look carefully, the reason why these ugly figures jump forward is because in the middle of them, a flower sedan is carried. Hua Hong Yin Hong was so dripping with blood that it seemed weird in the dark forest. Jian Wushuang, who completely concealed his breath, saw this scene, frowning slightly, and then looked at Qing Qing. The purpose of Qingxin is to grasp the spirit, and even if you want to release the momentum of the power. At this moment, a seemingly struggling whimper rang through the sedan chair. Chapter 48:12. The whimper was obviously made by the woman, and the sound of kicking and shaking shook the entire sedan chair. But those ugly and giant-looking figures didn't care, and continued to leap forward happily. "Help, Wu!" A murky voice was heard through the sedan chair. Rushing relatives? Jian Wushuang looked at those ugly bodies, frowning slightly. "I'm going to kill it directly, and I will find out later," Di Qing said. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly, and he saw it the first time that these ugly forms were not good, and the special power that overflowed was neither like the strength but with a certain uncomfortable atmosphere. Immediately, I Ching stretched out his hand, and the irresistible force directly stirred up. The dark forests of Shino are bright under the impact of guilt-like diffusivity, and even the gloomy sky is clear. The more than 10 ugly forms that were only the ancestral level of top cultivation realm, how could they resist the dynamism of Di Qing? They did not even react, they were directly burned into green smoke. The sedan fell to the ground with a thud, and fell silent. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing immediately revealed their bodies from the forest, just as they were preparing to take a step forward. Those ugly bodies that were directly burned into blue smoke, like sand gathering into towers, condensed from the ground. They were puzzled and all scratched their heads, and then stared at the bronze bell with their big eyes searching around, just in sight of the two who appeared to be in shape. For a time, all the ugly bodies screamed violently. The thick, long canine teeth that had turned outwards became several times longer, and together with the body of more than a few feet, they began to linger with a dark breath. They were furious and strode forward to smash both Jian Wushuang and Di Qing. But Jian Wushuang didn't look at them or look at them. He stretched a finger forward, and the heavy strength like mountains and seas overflowed from his fingers, turning into thousands of magnificent horses, strangling them all. Strange, why didn't I just destroy them just now? Di Qing was puzzled. Jian Wushuang just wanted to speak, but found that the ground was ringing again, and saw a plume of black smoke spreading from the ground, gathering sand into a tower, and transformed into more than 10 ugly forms. 12 forms, but none of them were small. You know, the blow that Jian Wushuang just made was enough to make Yanxian unable to lift his head. But it did not affect them at all. The 12 ugly physiques were even more violent, and they rushed in with terrifying fervor. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were slightly frowned, and he pointed out again with one finger, and the force was several times more terrifying than before, and they were twisted into pieces again, without even a little breath. What are these things which is harder to kill than Yanxian? Di Qing also frowned. Although these guys were so unbearable, the resurrection one after another made him both curious. Unsurprisingly, the 12 ugly bodies once again condensed, but this time the body became a little darker. At this moment, a head came out of the curtain of the sedan chair, spit out the red thread in his mouth, and shouted angrily, "They are all nightmares, you can't kill them, hurry and escape." Nightmare? Interesting. Jian Wushuang smiled, and had already come up with a countermeasure. This time, he no longer directly killed, but released Yanli into a side cage to trap the 12 bodies in it, constantly pulling away and consuming these guys. The so-called nightmare is a kind of extremely special energy. Their birth is even without substance, because it is conceived by people in their deep sleep and only exists on the basis of a certain mysterious medium. This is why Jian Wushuang and Di Qing failed to kill them before. However, Jian Wushuang also saw that their energy was still limited. As long as they trapped them, their nightmare would naturally dissipate. Sure enough, the nightmares trapped in Yanli's cage were even more bleak, and they kept repeating the reciprocating movement, which was no longer alive. And the girl who was showing her head out of the flower sedan was very bright when she saw so many nightmares being killed by the town. Although her hands and feet were by the red rope, she jumped forward, rushed out of the sedan chair, and fell heavily on the ground. Ouch! She had a pain, frowning slightly, and her thin lips pursed. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing looked at each other, and then walked towards her. It is said that it is the most magnificent day for women to marry makeup. Right now this woman is even more so. She is wearing a bright red Xiohe suit, her eyebrows are like distant mountains, and her lips are like dots. Although she has blush on her cheeks, she still can't hide her heroism. In particular, there is a sesame mole on the corner of the mouth, which is even more lively and flexible. As soon as they saw her approaching, she nodded in excitement. "Girl, is this place called Shanghuang?" asked Shouwu Mushuang, and waved away the red string from her. The girl watched Jian Wushuang's eyes flashing, and quickly gave a gift. The little girl thanked the adult for help. Jian Wushuang waved his hand and asked the question just now. "Shanghuang? But here is Qingzhou." The girl said a little puzzled. "Qingzhou, what is this place? Is it a state capital in Shanghuang?" He and Di Qing glanced at each other, and there was a kind of intuition in their hearts. They seemed to be pitted. It was urgent to ask the woman for a moment, and finally came to a real conclusion. They were really pitted. And the woman at the moment is not an ordinary woman, but the only daughter of Qingzhi's largest sect, who has visited several heavens earlier, and naturally knows the names of some heavens. The realm where Jian Wushuang and Di Qing are located at the moment is actually called the Qingyu, and the wilderness that is close to the big sky is basically the two heavens. Damn things, dare to tease this seat. Di Qingqing angry, terrible Yanli escaped. Well, is a big deal, we will find it again, it won't take long. Jian Wushuang relieved him. The girl's dexterous eyes rolled around and then looked at Jian Wushuang. Master, are you going to the wasteland? Jian Wushuang nodded without concealing himself. That's great, I just knew. She hadn't finished her words yet, and the surrounding mountains and rivers shook suddenly. The earth was torn, the mountains collapsed, and the whole world was ruined. At the same time, the sky dome dimmed, and neither of his eyes could see the palm of his hand. The girl's complexion changed suddenly. It's Demon Venerable, Nightmare Demon Venerable is here. As her words fell, it seemed that there was some unnamed repression from the sky dome, which quickly swallowed and covered everything. The thick old wood can't bear the pressure, and the large area is fragmented. Chapter 48:13. It seemed that there was something asleep forever. Along with the shattered canopy of the canopy, it revealed that a gloomy sky was revealed. At the same time, there were bursts of whimpers resounding in Shino. Sir, let's go quickly. This deity respects the monk's mind and has the most intellectual power. If he is not careful, he will become his slavery. In the haze, the girl in the red Shioha suit hurriedly urged, I know where the road is, please ask the two adults to leave with me. Jian Wushuang stood still in his place, his eyes turned to the sky. That special and thick breath was like a big man, trapping all three of them in it, blocking all the way. After that, 2 rounds of giant eyes like Qinghui Haoyue appeared, clean and clear enough to reflect the traces of everything. A few moments later, those 2 rounds of giant eyeballs suddenly produced hundreds of millions of black silk threads, which eventually condensed into a weird phantom at the end of the silk thread. The phantom is very hazy, as if it is formed by the amalgamation of various unknown substances, and it looks very strange. It is backed by those 2 huge and clear-eye wheels, like 2 round wings. Such as so-called Demon Venerable, the strength of the realm is actually just a realm of immortality, and Jian Wushuang is naturally not afraid. Things that pretend to be fooled by ghosts can't be put on the table. Jian Wushuang's mood was already bad, and he released Yen Li directly, and he swung it out with a swish. The all-out blow belonging to the peak of Yenxian was unreserved and smashed the strange ghost image into the air. The humble servant, Ru, etc., must all surrender to me. Su Ying confided the truth and faced the blow of the Qing, apparently disdained dodge. At the next moment, an eye-popping scene appeared, and the gas field felt that the virtual shadow that shattered the sky was actually pulled directly from the sky by the slap of Jian Wushuang, and it was slammed into the ground fiercely. Thousands of smoke and dust. The girl was shocked and covered her mouth with one hand, looking at this scene in disbelief. Almost half of Qingjia's heavens succumbed, and the trembling nightmare deity was actually caught by the unseen mountain in front of him, except for the handsome young man who looked like a crown jade, and slapped it into the ground? That's the deity of Yenxian realm. Then Jian Wushuang didn't think so. This so-called nightmare demon king, besides encroaching on the general state of mind through some kind of bewitching means, his real body was not even as good as the ordinary Yenxian. Even more unfortunately, Jian Wushuang's consciousness has already reached full consummation when he achieved ancestry in the divine universe, far from being comparable to this nightmare demon. Even if he stood still, letting the deity to nibble at the state of mind, he could only return without success. Naturally, Jian Wushuang is also too lazy to use a means to directly cover it with one palm. The deep black gas on the sky dome quickly dissipated, and 2 giant eye wheels like Haoyue were also blinded by Di Qing. Humble slave, how dare you how? Without saying a word, Jian Wushuang once again slapped the nightmare demon into the ground. Noisy. Jian Wushuang frowned. It was nothing but a nightmare that engulfed in greed. It was not worthy of him. Now that he knew that this place was not Shanghuang Tianyu, he and I Ching apparently did not intend to stay, turned around and prepared to leave. Adult, please stay. A cry rang out. It was the retention of the girl in Shioha suit. Seeing him looking back, her cheeks were even more ruddy, and she stretched her hands to pull up her sideburn-like broken hair. She looked like a very stiff figure and gave a salute. The little girl washes the pool and thanked the adults for their life-saving grace. Jian Wushuang didn't plan to wait for her to finish, just waved his hand, and he planned to leave. "Hello, can you listen to Ben Ant?" The little girl finished speaking. The girl named Shikingqi's voice was gentle. "I'm aware of the upper wilderness that you mentioned." Jian Wushuang Wenyan paused and looked at her again, not sure. "Do you really know?" Shikingqi raised his eyebrows proudly. "That is of course. My father is the first suzerain of Qingzhou. The resources in his hands are not countable. At that time, I followed my father to travel to various heavens." He pondered for a moment and then said, "Since that is the case, could the girl tell Shang Huang the approximate location? Is it important for you to go to Shanghai?" "That's right." "Well, it's because you saved my aunt. The little girl's life. I decided to take you personally. I don't need it anymore. The journey is dangerous." "No, I must be asked to take you there, but it is extremely desolate and secret. Even if I tell you the approximate location, you can't find it." Jian Wushuang and Di Qing looked at each other, and some were unsure. At this moment, the nightmare demon Venerable, who was almost distracted by the two slaps, quietly crawled out of the ground and was ready to escape. Shikingqi looked at the truth and hurriedly said, "Adult must not let him escape, he is a big harm." Jian Wushuang nodded his head and took a quick move. He immediately ingested the Demon King and exquisitely squeezed it into the size of a projectile. Zikinki was once again shocked by this method. The demon who could resist the chamber with her father was now rubbing up. "Let go of the deity, the humble servant, you will regret it." The demon squeezed into projectile size jumped like thunder. He seemed to be screaming without fear. When Jian Wushuang was about to twist it out, Shikingqi suddenly stretched out two palms and caught his palm. His eyebrows bent into a crescent moon. "Master, can you give me this thing? I plan to give it to me swallow taper swallowed." Jian Wushuang drew back his palm indifferently. By the way, the Demon King was thrown to her. "Thank you, Master," Shikingqi said, and then he directly undid the red band that tied his hair, and the projectile-sized Demon King. "Are you going to take us to the wasteland?" Di Qing interjected and asked. Shikingqi nodded again and again. "Of course, without my leadership, you will definitely not be able to go to Shanghuang." "Then let's leave now?" Jian Wushuang said. "No hurry, please go back to the sect gate with me first. I plan to bring some things. Let's go again." Shikingqi rode, and then stride in the forest in a big step, reversing the previous little daughter's posture. "Go ahead, hurry up to keep up. It's really troublesome. Sooner or later, he'll catch that thing and he'll slap my bones." Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly, and then followed him with the Qing, who was wearing a red Xiohe suit, and washed the pool. Thousands of Xuanqi mountains and rivers were left behind, and the number of monks gathered around the mainland began to increase. Chapter 48:14. It was only half a day before I went to find the elder Zongman and a group of disciples who came to Zikinki before they appeared. "Li Bo, you can be regarded as coming." Shiching Chimian was sullen. "Would you like to come to the Mozen's old den for a while later?" Elder Zongman, who is called Li Bo, has a calm complexion and holds a jade rod. After hearing her complaint, he smiles bitterly. "My little ancestor, we are all desperate to find you. No, you will surely be able to find you in half a day." Shiching Chi snorted, and then picked up the red belt tied with the deity and shook it. "This guy has been caught by the girl. The teacher returns to the sect." Li Bo was stunned. Before he could fix his mind, the figure of Shiching Chi was already as far away as the same. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing also followed suit. Above a cloudless and voluminous Zhongshan mountain, there are more than 100 chains, traverse the various mountain ranges, and the sect gates on each peak are connected in series, which looks magnificent. This is the most prestigious sect gate in Qingzhou, named Shangqing Pavilion. Almost half of the monks in the heavens are honored to enter the Shangqing Pavilion. This is because the patriarch of the Shangqing Pavilion is an immortal Yanxian, and his disciples have more than a dozen powerful Yanyans. No matter which continent they look at, they are all dominated by Biju. The guarding mountain array that covered the entire Shangqing Pavilion also demonstrated its detachment. Although the Shoshan formation is just a matter of Jian Wushuang's wave, but he still condenses his breath and prepares to enter the mountain gate of Shangqing Pavilion. But then, more than 10 disciples of Shoshan flew directly from the dark and stopped them. Shangqing Pavilion is heavy, outsiders stop. A bunch of stupid things. Didn't you see that this is the noble guest invited by the girl? Shi Qingqi turned back, angrily. It's okay to wash the girl, we won't go in. We are waiting here for a day. If washing the girl is really inconvenient, I will retreat. Jian Wushuang whispered, but stepped back and waited. Well, after I pick up something, I will walk with you. Shi Qingqi hurriedly said, and the back shape flashed directly into the mountain gate. Looking at the figure that was quite off, Jian Wushuang always had a kind of unreliable hunch on his mind. Why don't you let me go? I'm going to go today. Inside the pavilion of the Shangqing Pavilion, Zikinki stood on a side of the mountain, akimbo, and his red makeup had been replaced with a plain shirt. Dare you dare to let me put on the wedding dress to elicit the nightmare demon venerable? Why don't you dare to let me go out of our heaven to visit now? Nonsense, Qingti, please hurry me down. The middle-aged man in a white robe, restrained and glorious, yelled angrily. Zikinki still has his hands on his hips. I don't, Zikingwa, you say yes or no. Don't agree. The middle-aged man was irritated. Do you know how much you weigh, a dead girl? Do you know the concept of Tianyu? A girl like you can't even get out of Tianyu and will be torn by the wind. Do you know? Come on, don't I hear that kind of falsehood? You don't want to lie to me. In short, I'm done this time, no one can stop me. Shi Qingqi said loudly. The middle-aged man apparently did not plan to endure this arrogant and willful girl. He stretched out his hand and waved 1,000 strands of huamang firmly to the washing pool and dragged her off the rock. Wait, girl, you don't want to come up with 100 years of confinement. Don't, Dad, I don't want to be confined. Shi Qingqi screamed, struggling, but she was just a master of Yen Yen. How could she break free of Yen Xian's shackles? At this moment, a stream of streamers flew down the mountain and stone, cutting off the huamang in the middle-aged man's hand, and then directly carrying the wash pool and running. Because of the speed approaching the extreme, when he reacted, the streamer had already leaped more than 100 miles away. It was a snow-white, variegated, fox-like creature that resembled a kind of black tiger. Its speed was so fast that it escaped from the mountain gate of Shangqing Pavilion in a blink of an eye. All the elder disciples of Shangqing Pavilion listened to me and gave me a life of Zikinki. If anyone took it down, I would give her a license. All the gates of the Shangqing Pavilion were sensation for a time, and a total of more than 60,000 disciples were dispatched to capture the Qingqi. Jian Wushuang, who had been waiting outside the mountain gate, raised his eyebrows slightly after hearing the warning sound from the sky. A moment later, a fragrant wind swept out of the mountain gate, riding across the cleansing pool on the back of the beast with a look of excitement. Master, my father, he agreed, let's run quickly. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing looked at each other, then shook their heads helplessly. This was a huge chase code in the undisputed Xuanao mountain gate. The three bodies broke through the clouds and soared, followed by tens of thousands of disciples behind the black pressure, quite a sense of panic. But with the help of Jian Wushuang and Yi Qing, those tens of thousands of disciples could only watch the three figures in the end, just like the stars disappeared in the sky. The middle-aged man hurried over after a while, but when he saw the empty clouds, there was still half of his daughter. He was desperate and roared, "Who is it who abducted my daughter?" Far away, it seems that the voice of Zikinki was sent from Jiaxiadi. Dad, you can rest assured I will be safe and sound, maybe I can still find the mother during the journey. You bully the ancestor. The clouds of smoke dissipated, and the original blue sky vault disappeared, replaced by an endless void. The uncountable big day stars dotted one side of the heavenly plane also flooded into her eyes. It's so beautiful, no wonder my mother will leave my father to travel to the void. Shi Qingqi murmured. Jian Wushuang didn't want to ask about her family's private affairs, and knew that the girl had stolen away from his father, so she planned to return it once she knew the specific location of Shanghuang. Immediately afterwards he asked, I said to wash the girl, where is the location of Shengwangshenyu, do you know? Shi Qingqi was refreshed, his eyes blinked flexibly, and then he was affirmed, no, I must know it's there. At the end of the speech, she stretched out her slender palms and pointed to a desolate emptiness that was rare even in the stars. Jian Wushuang and Yi Qing are now also regarded as dead horses as living horse doctors, no matter whether her words are true or false, and after confirming it again, they went forward. With his refuge in Yanli, although it was only a cleansing pool that entered Yanding's cultivation, he was able to cope with it in the face of the terrible void of the wind. Chapter 48:15. The beast that was originally cleaned under the pedestal was also shrunk to the length of her arm, squinting comfortably at the back of her neck. It's a dangerous thing to move around in the void without one person and one animal, but it's so long. Jian Wushuang is helpless. This girl is simply an extra-large burden. I really want to take her to Dami Tian. I am afraid I might have some trouble. Yi Qing's face was cold. Maybe not long ago, he was pitted by the few guys stationed in the ferry array, and he was not in a good mood. Naturally, he didn't have any good feelings about Shi Qingqi in his view. The lower the level of the guy, the more insidious and cunning, including the woman at the moment. Is the way you took really correct? Di Qing still asked her if she didn't believe her. Zikinki embraced the little beast, his eyes dodged. When, of course, right me, but I came with my father. He sneered again. If you dare to lie to us, it will be like them in the end. At the end of the speech, Yi Qing's palm was squeezed away, and several ancient stars suddenly burst, and the unimaginable doomsday scene appeared in the void, and the whole void was collapsed into a black hole. Goo! The cleaning pool swallowed heavily, and the corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily. Such a devastating technique, I am afraid that her father can't do it. The little beast in her arms seemed to feel threatened and grinned towards the teeth. Okay, let's go ahead, Jian Wushuang said indifferently. The calm aura calmed down Qingqing, and no longer cleaned the pond. Recovering from the cold deterrence just now, Shi Qingqi had already secretly regretted leaving the original heaven. She shouted in her heart, that lousy is going to waste, who knows where it is. I just talk about it casually, should the punishment be so serious? Shanghuang, the so-called Shanghuang as the name implies, is definitely a desolate and ruined heaven. It's definitely right to think about this. God bless me, I'm not pointing the wrong way, bless. Opening the bow did not turn back the arrow. Shi Qingqi had already decided the head iron in the end. Anyway, there was no escape route. She simply let go completely. In order to increase the credibility, she waved from time to time to correct the course of the advance, ran to the more remote and desolate void depth. Jian Wushuang nodded secretly. From the route she pointed to, it basically met the environment of Shanghuang Tianyu. As they moved forward, the sky planes in the vast sky were extremely scarce, and even the stars were sparse. Everything he sees is extremely cold. This boring to extreme companionship with the cold void made the cleaning pool tired from the initial excitement. This trip is independent of the sword she thinks about. Fresh clothes and angry horses are completely different kinds of existence. But if I choose this way myself, there is no turning back. The journey in the void seemed to never end. The cleaning pool was already dizzy and muddled, and Jian Wushuang finally seemed to be in this void, smelling some kind of forbidden breath. Yi Qing also felt it naturally, opened a pair of golden eyes to explore. That kind of prohibitive breath reveals the ancient, silent, and extremely secretive. Obviously, the power of this kind of breath restraint is laid, and it does not want to be noticed. Jian Wushuang was most sensitive to the breath, and soon his eyes locked on the depth of the void in front of him. There was no one knowing how many years it was, and no monk stepped into the ancient heaven. Is there a wasteland there? Jian Wushuang whispered softly, but quickly denied it again. The wasteland is a hairless land, with a hot and dark red shape like purgatory, which is almost completely different from this heavenly plane. but for the sake of insurance, he decided to go and find out. The three bodies are like streamers flying towards the unknown sky. That kind of deserted, silent atmosphere of restraint envelopes the entire plane of heaven, like a thick layer of water waves. Entering into it, suddenly an unparalleled pressure blessing. Shiqing Qi snorted, and his whole body suddenly collapsed. This heavy pressure is that even Jian Wushuang feels strenuous, let alone her. Looking around, the entire heavenly plane is composed of rugged dark red rocks, boundless and borderless. There is no other than the rock. That kind of prohibitive breath is more obvious, but I don't know where it came from. Are you sure this is a wasteland? Di Qing asked Jian Wushuang while looking at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang looked around, and finally looked at the Shiqing pond. With his refuge, Shiqing Qi quickly recovered from the confusion, but when the two looked at him, they suddenly felt a cold sweat. It seems, probably not. Is it right or not? Di Qingxing screamed. Vicious. Shiqing Qi didn't dare to finish it, but just shook his head. No, certainly not. Jian Wushuang heard and said, since it is not, let's leave, the journey can't be delayed. Di Qing nodded, and when he was about to leave, Shiqing Qi suddenly screamed. The little beast that had been entrenched in her neck seemed to be pulled by some unknown force and fell straight down. Sanqing! She exclaimed, then rushed to the ground desperately. Jian Wushuang's brows were slightly frowned, and his figure flashed down. Perhaps because of that kind of prohibition, the gravity of this whole sky is up to 1,000,000 times, and the speed of falling is even more terrible. Afterwards, a bunch of Chinese mangosteens pulled down the falling beast and washed the pool, and finally let her fall to the ground. Shiqing Qi hugged the little beast and sat on the ground looking gratefully at Jian Wushuang. Don't be so reckless next time, leave at a speed. He said indifferently and then turned to leave. At this time, that wild, silent atmosphere seemed to wake up from a long time ago and emerged thinly. Emperor, are you here? There was a thunderous sound with excitement in all the sky. The voice has order, avenue, and blessings of luck. It is extremely complicated and rare. Shiqing Po was shocked to stand up in an instant, and jumped towards the back of Jian Wushuang as if he were walking away. Emperor, are you here? Are you here to lead us? The voice was thick, and there was some uncertainty in the excitement, and he was asking carefully. Di Qing was also shocked. Facing the breath of that voice, he felt like he was facing a big enemy. Jian Wushuang said nothing in silence, and at the same time backed away without any trace, ready to escape at any time. So far, he understands that it is very likely that an unintentional intrusion into this heavenly domain has sealed the existence of a certain ancient power. Chapter 48:16. Moreover, the existence of this ancient power is very likely that Zhenwuyang was sealed off from Zhenwuyang when he opened up his domain. Shiqing Qi squatted behind Jian Wushuang and stared at the beautiful eyes in horror. Emperor? Emperor, why don't you speak? The voice that could deter the truth, but very cautious, showed a sense of surrender. Jian Wushuang, who was also a little nervous at first, calmed down, because he heard the respect in his voice, the mellow feeling, which was by no means a treacherous villain. Wushuang, leave this place quickly. Di Qing said cautiously. Jian Wushuang looked at him and then said, no hurry, let's wait here for a moment. When he was finished, he walked slowly. Wait for me. Ziqingqi quickly followed, fearing that it would be half a point behind. Tai Qing frowned, and eventually followed without saying a word. The reason why Jian Wushuang didn't leave, but moved forward slowly, was because the sound of the call gave him an inexplicable and intimate feeling. The more you move forward, the more clear the voice becomes. Secretary, see the Emperor. An ancient scream seemed to come from the heart of the earth, respectful and pious. Jian Wushuang's heart moved, and then he looked at the rugged mountain stones under his feet. Those voices obviously came from the heart of the earth. After a moment of silence, he said, I am just a passerby, not your emperor. Those voices disappeared, and then resounded again. It's impossible, your whole body has the breath of an emperor, how could it not be a prince of a prince? Are you Emperor Renunciation? The voice suddenly felt sad and lonely. I'm really not your emperor, I'm just a passerby who didn't intend to break in here. Jian Wushuang was helpless, and he asked, What is your emperor? What is the name? The voices suddenly became alert again. Are you Zhenliang's seated eagle dog? Jian Wushuang responded, No, rest assured. The voice was silent for a moment, and finally said, The real name of the emperor is the Six-Crow Emperor. My heart moved like a thunder that exploded. Isn't the name of the Emperor Six Crows the master of the former heavenly court who had previously entered into Wushuang and other people without any intention? The real name of the emperor could not be repeated. In combination with the excitement of these previous voices and piety, they were definitely the subjects of the Emperor of the Six Crows. It's just that it's too coincidental. A heavenly field that I didn't intend to enter, the power that was sealed in it was actually related to the Six Crow Emperors. Since you say you are a guest, why is there the breath of Emperor Lu Crow? Jian Wushuang heard and said, A sentence or two of this matter are unclear. Please show up. The world was silent for a long time, and the voice sighed. It's not that we don't want to show up, we are really weak, our fairy source is imprisoned by the eagle dog under the true Wuyang seat, the fairy body is bound, and we can't move it for half. The sword moved uncontrollably, and through those sounding directions, he had determined that the place where they were imprisoned was in the divine peak directly in front. He flew away directly, facing the Shenfeng, palms and fingers like a sword, with thousands of sword intentions, carrying the momentum to cut off the Shenfeng. Boom! The whole Shenfeng is divided into two, and at the same time Jian Wushuang releases the sword intention one after another, like carving, constantly cutting Shenfeng. In the end, the whole Shenfeng was cut, leaving only a base of thousands of feet. Then, with a wave of his hand, the stone chips kept peeling off, eventually revealing a chain of thick and long dragons. There are thousands of chains, and at the end of the chains, there are 18 bodies trapped. The clothing on them was already broken, and the trapped limbs were twisted in a rather strange posture, apparently broken. This is a total of 18 figures, which were printed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Shi Qingqi covered his mouth with his hands, afraid to make a sound. Di Qing also frowned, and was always vigilant. 18 body shapes, 18 great Yanxian. It's just that they are so miserable, it still makes Jian Wushuang unexpected. Faced with such a huge movement, these 18 bodies are naturally aware, but they are all at a loss, and no one looks at Jian Wushuang, as if there is no such thing as Sword Wushuang. Jian Wushuang looked at them and quickly found out the reason. These 18 great Yanxian, all their eyes have been dug out, only empty eyes, naturally cannot see the outside world. Are you still there? The old man with a long eyebrow headed, asked carefully. Jian Wushuang nodded, I'm here. In this case, can you tell me why you have the breath of Emperor Six Crows? Naturally, I can tell, Jian Wushuang had no intention of concealing it, but even if he had no intention of entering the heavenly court of the Six-Crow Emperor, and how to gain the perception of the Six-Crow Emperor, he spoke to them carefully. Ding Qing was cautious and directly released the Yanli, wrapping up the wash pool with his ears ready to listen to ensure that Jian Wushuang's words would not be heard by anyone other than them. After all, such matters are matters of life and death, and if they come out, the consequences will be catastrophic. Time goes by. When Jian Wushuang's voice finally stopped, everything was silent. The 18 Dayan immortals were silent, as if their hearts were dead. Since their eyes were dug out, they naturally couldn't cry in sorrow, but just sluggishly. In the end, the old man with long eyebrows asked in a loud voice, Are you all dead? Yes, there is no Yanxian, de Yanxian, survive. If the sword is unparalleled, it is like a sharp knife cutting them fiercely. Slowly lowering his head, the old man with long eyebrows mourned, The servants are incompetent, and ultimately failed to keep the heaven and protect the emperor. The practice has been tempered all the way to the present, making Jian Wushuang like a rock, but a complete state of mind does not mean cold blood. He had seen countless immortal bones in that realm, and each immortal bone was once the immortal that dominated the heaven, but belonged to the war between emperors and kings, and they all died. The reason I have seen it so there will be resonance, and naturally they can feel their death. Jian Wushuang said these things, and his mood seemed to be somewhat transparent. In the end, the old man with long eyebrows slowly raised his head, looked in the direction of Jian Wushuang and said slowly, "Since the emperor finally gave you the inheritance and sentiment to you, then live well. Although I always want Zhenliang to perish, I want to tell you that you should never fight with him, leave him, and live with the wish of the 6 Crow Emperors." "Why?" Jian Wushuang looked at him and asked. Chapter 48:17. The long-browed old man's voice was full of irrepressible sorrow and despair. "There is no reason. Zhenwu Yang is in an unknown luck, and even the emperor cannot kill him. As long as he does not want to die, no one can kill him. If you face him one day, it will only die in vain in the end. Rather than die, it is better to take the last wish of the 6 Crow Emperor and leave Zhenliang far away." For his words, Jian Wushuang is undisputed, because with his current state and strength, fighting with the emperor is still too far away for him. Then Jian Wushuang said, "I'll consider what you said, but before that, I can ask you what was wrong under the throne of the 6 Crows, and why are you trapped here?" The long-browed old man heard the words, and his mournful face slowly converged. He said, 18 of us were all on duty together under the throne of the 6 Crow Emperor, controlling the flow of gas throughout the heavenly courts and the changes in the astrology. Emperor Crow was named as 18 spectators. The reason why it will be sealed here is because it was designed by Zhen Wuyang. He took the oath when he went to war. As long as I waited for the 18 observers to find the most suitable place for him to build the heavenly court, he would not go to war with us. I never thought that all this was a conspiracy that he had long expected. After controlling the 18 visions in his hands, he resolutely attacked the heaven of the 6 Crows. But we didn't know the news. After being controlled by Zhen Wuyang, we set out to choose a place for him to create heaven. Finally, his heavenly court was completed, and we were immediately destroyed by the eagle dog under his seat, cut off the fairy body, cut out his eyes, and were trapped under this dark sky until today. Elders with long eyebrows looked calm, as if they were talking about other people's affairs, but Jian Wushuang knew that their hearts could never be calm. The fairy source was damaged, the fairy body was cut off, and the eyes were cut out and trapped in the cold dead zone to this day. This is capital punishment. Who can endure this kind of heart so far? But that's it. 18 Dayan immortals waited so far, hoping that the 6 Crow Emperors would take them back. What came was the desperate news that even the emperor had made it ancient. Your Excellency, I have a ruthless request from the 18 observers. I hope you agree. The old man with long eyebrows said. Now in the old court, the emperors are ancient, and only 18 of us are left, and they have no use, so I would like to invite you to be able to spare no effort and execute me. It is also a relief. Jian Wushuang's brows were slightly wrinkled, and it was absolutely impossible for him to kill them. The Emperor of the 6 Crows alone is so gracious that he cannot kill them, even with good intentions. After a moment of contemplation, he flew straight ahead and came to them. 6 Crow Emperor is kind to me, and you are also the last 18 remaining in the heavenly court. I can't deal with you. Thinking about it, I can only take you away. After Jian Wushuang's words were finished, the invisible long sword condensed in his palm would cut off the chain around them. Your Excellency. It seems that Jian Wushuang had already expected to do this. The old man with a long eyebrow hurriedly said, there is a prohibition planted by Zhen Wuyang on this chain. Once there is external damage, he will inevitably find it in the first place. None of us can live. Jian Wushuang stopped in time, frowning tightly, and the close of the chain was indeed planted under scrutiny, that is to say, as long as the chain was damaged, Zhen Wuyang would surely find it in the first place. In waiting for the 18 observations, only one death, but also your Excellency. This time, their 18 great Yenxian said at the same time. Death is impossible, at least you don't think about dying in my hands, Jian Wushuang said. There are only 18 of you remaining in the entire heavenly court. If you die again, then the 6 Crow Emperor's heaven is the real death. You let me live well, and you yourself can live well too. But we. The long-browed old man couldn't bear to say that they lived with this look, which was far less happy than the death. Listen, you're still like this. How can I rescue you one day when I have enough strength or can't be discovered by Zhen Weiyang? Jian Wushuang condensed his voice and said very seriously. 18 figures, no one spoke this time. Your Excellency, why do you suffer? There is nothing bitter or painful, just when I received the grace of the Six-Crow Emperor, and the grace of returning him bit by bit is. For a long while, the old man with long eyebrows solemnly said, Well, how about we wait? Your Excellency, just go, if you have enough strength in 1 year and you can still think of me, come on, then I will wait for 18 views like, let the Lord send you. It's not necessary to send, you just have to remember that I am gracious. I don't think it will be too late that day, waiting for me. Jian Wushuang said with a wave of his hand. I'm also exploring a thing now. I can't delay it here for too long. Please forgive me. The old man with long eyebrows nodded. Go ahead, sir, don't forget to wait for me. Jian Wushuang arched his hands at them, then slowly backed away. As he was about to leave, he turned back and said loudly, You, and remember my name is Jian Wushuang. Okay, we all remember. Shen Feng finally condensed again, and sealed the 18 visions together again, together with the dust and the unbearable memory. Jian Wushuang sighed silently in his heart, and then took Di Qing and Shi Qingpe to leave this unintentional heaven. Endless Shoyan is a deep, cold prison cage for those desperate Dayan immortals who came from the bottom of their hearts and is the capital punishment. They cannot change any status quo, they can only trust the unknown. What Jian Wushuang can do is to read the book www. Calm elevates their realm to free them from this purgatory. Everything is miserable, even if it is as strong as Dianxian, it is like a lonely boat, silent in the torrent that is about to rise. This vast territory is like a prison cage without a prison door. Every other era, some upheaval may occur. However, it is so cruel to study the dust of a grain of dust in the great Yanhuan, so how does the Yanhuan exist? When the entire Dianhuan is exposed in front of Jian Wushuang, what kind of scene should it be? Xin Yi his master. Old master, his mentor. What role will they play here? He was looking forward to it. Fear was never his way of solving things. Starting from the end of the day, and finally on the road, his eyes never feared. There are mountains and no roads in front of you, then open up an avenue abruptly. Chapter 48:18. Jian Wushuang's body is full of pride, an unprecedented surge. I am afraid that even he himself will not know, precisely because of the qualities he possesses, how much of the antiquity will be pleasing to the heart. After entering this great research world, he had done with the former Hongqin. But who is the ultimate in reading all things, who can believe that he can cut off the past? Everything is unknown, everything is just like the new dawn. Following the cleaning pool next to him, he glanced at him from time to time, and quickly pretended to look in the other direction casually, so reciprocating, but also tireless. Di Qing always frowned, and finally couldn't help but say, Wushuang, you were too reckless just now. If that was a trap, I'm afraid I won't even have the chance to escape now. Sorry, I was really too impulsive before. I just felt that voice was too kind, like some kind of unseen old friend, and would go deep into the danger. Jian Wushuang apologized. Di Qing looked at him and said, even if this is the case next time, it's better not to get involved in danger. Every quirky heaven in this big domain is full of immortal bones. Zhenwu Yang's original pioneering battle, so the killings created are far from what you can imagine. Today's Oasis realm was formed by including the realm of the 8 emperors at the time. Just as far as I know, 4 emperors fell into his hands. Don't try to go against him, he is terrible. At this moment, Di Qing's eyes became dignified. Jian Wushuang nodded. He has no injustice with me, and I certainly will not face him. Di Qing looked at the void in the distance. Is it? This great Yen is very complicated. Even if there is no injustice or hatred between you, you will not endlessly die. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly and stopped talking. Shi Qingqi feels that the dialogue between them is simple but complex and difficult to understand. It is like an explanation of a certain cloud and fog, full of uncertainty. But soon she became nervous again, because the two of them looked at her again together. "Girl, it's time to show the way." "Well, I just need to keep walking forward, I know." Shi Qingqi wailed inwardly. She could only continue this lie and could not look back. She believes that as long as she tells the truth, she may be crushed to death on the spot. Under the guidance of Shiqing Pond, Jian Wushuang and I Ching flew all the way, and in every breath, they could cross the cold and dead heavenly plains of several squares. Going to Damien Tian, where the sun is correct, the journey has so far been only dead and cold, and each heaven is like a barren land. It seems that no one has ever set foot in it. But gradually, the further forward, the void that was originally only reflected in the faint and aging stars began to become brighter. It was dim and dim as if reflected in the blood-like afterglow. Jian Wushuang didn't even notice anything strange, but the eyes of Di Qing showed doubt and caution in his eyes. He smelled a trace of familiarity. Then, when the first hazy light came into his eyes, he finally knew where the familiarity came from. It is a hibiscus tree, an endless hibiscus tree. Each strand of leaves, like a bronze casting, blooms in the void, and the dim light shining in the void is also coming out of the branches and leaves. Right now, the void in front becomes misty, replaced by an unimaginable sea. And the endless hibiscus trees grow in this sea area, listing 2 rows, which have been spreading to the infinite distance with the sea area. This scene shocked Jian Wushuang, just like a fairy trail, unimaginable. No one of them would think that the road to the sky ahead will be replaced by a sea area where one side cannot know where its latitude is. After hesitating for a moment, Jian Wushuang and Di Qing looked at each other, then walked forward and flew over the sea. Each hibiscus tree on both sides is like a fairy trail standing upright, the halo emitted from the magnificent branches and leaves shining on the body. There is an indescribable warmth. Each hibiscus tree growing on the sea area is far more than several times larger than the only hibiscus tree in the northern celestial state. Jin Wudiqing, with ancestral blood on his body, is proud, and will only reveal his true appearance on the hibiscus tree and then rest. At this moment, he was already extremely relaxed, and the skin exposed to the outside of the Chinese suit already had golden veins flowing. But Jian Wushuang did not relax his vigilance. The more unusual the place, the more unexpected things will happen. For example, when he first entered the Great Voyage in Dianhuan, no one would think that there would be a terrible giant sea-sky chapter under the sea. So he was vigilant at all times. And the wash pool that embraced the little animal already had eye movements and was amazed. This kind of fantasy is so extreme that it is like a fairyland, so she can't help but get lost. Jian Wushuang beat her at the right time with vigorous force, so as not to let her get lost. The 3 figures traveled through the Fusang waterway. "Are you saying that the end of the waterway will be connected to Domitian?" Di Qing asked. "We have been traveling for some time now, and it should be reasonable that we should be arriving soon." Jian Wushuang did not speak, but looked at the Shiqing Pond beside him. The corners of her lips stiffened and raised. Don't worry, it's coming soon, I have a hunch." "I hope so." Tai Qing's voice was cold, and she did not look at her, soaring forward evenly. I don't know how long it has passed. Before the unobstructed view of the open sea, there was suddenly a white pontoon boat floating leisurely. Jian Wushuang was vigilant directly, and at the same time secretly tried to deal with the situation that might arise next. That leaf by Peng alone boat leisurely complacent, Yu reading www. Akanshu. No matter how the 3 men of Jian Wushuang soared, it was hanging in front of them, neither far nor close. "You travelers, traveling along the road, it is better to come to the boat for a while to relieve the difficulties." A thick and old voice rang from the boat and passed into Jian Wu's ears. Di Qing looked at him, shaking his head without trace, and begging him not to go. But at the next moment, the change was abrupt, and when they saw that they were not passing by, that by Peng lone boat actually drove backwards. In an instant he stopped in front of Jian Wushuang and others. This speed surprised them all, and they were all ready to fight. You travelers don't need to have any worries. Board the ship, the old man will take you for a while. In Yu Guizhou, an old man wearing a Danqing robe turned his head to look at them and smiled calmly. Ing Run chess piece sandwiched between his and his food would not fall. Chapter 48:19. Looking towards the solitary boat, there was no chess on one chessboard and 2 Danqing robe. However, Jian Wushuang did not leave, but arched his hands. Old gentleman, thank you for your kindness. It's just that we are on a different path, so we won't bother. It's okay, although the end point is different, but during this time, we can move forward together, and our 2 old guys haven't spent time with outsiders. The old man in the Danqing robe smiled, and then the chess piece between his fingers landed on the chessboard. In the face of this repeated invitation, Jian Wushuang was somewhat vigilant. There is a boat crossing, so you can save some energy to deal with what may happen next, isn't it? After Dao said this, he stopped talking, and instead he played chess with another Dao. Jian Wushuang, who was still vigilant, was relieved, and his figure fell into a lone boat. That kind-hearted and devoted man, and another unsmiling old-style killer on the chessboard, could not care about chatting with Jian Wushuang and others. Sir, this place is so beautiful. Shi Qingqi was behind him, and could not help but whisper softly. But Jian Wushuang didn't talk to her. After coming to the lone boat from his figure, his eyes were all placed on the chessboard. This is a strange game. There is no black spot on the whole chessboard. The 2 masters are all white. Bai Zixiang has already passed half a round. He wondered, it was all white, how did the 2 masters identify who was the adversary? Are they like the ancestors of Feng Tian, who used to be a divine universe, and they are both bad chessmen with poor chess skills? Even though Sword Warrior is even worse than Feng Tian's playing chess, he never knew it, but he watched the game carefully. Soon he was shocked. Because he couldn't understand anything, the 2 sides stopped, and he couldn't even tell the enemy. However, Jian Wushuang's heart is clear, and these 2 old-fashioned chess skills can never be his wild fox like him, nor like Feng Tian's ancestors. After several chaotic eras, they only know to block the eyes, but they are not mediocre. It's a real master. Even though Jian Wushuang can't distinguish the enemy from both sides of Bai Zi, he can clearly see the offensive of the 2 masters. The old-fashioned chess game, which looks kind, is as fierce as the top, and he likes to siege and eat. And the old man who has not spoken from beginning to end and is unsmiling, but on the contrary has a gentle attitude, is not anxious and impatient, and slowly draws his attention. Moreover, this game is only over half. When the unsmiling old man stopped, the sympathetic old man was immediately annoyed. It shouldn't be, how could it be lost? At this time, looking at a fresh cleansing pool, I couldn't help but say, it's really strange, the chess should be black and white, how can you tell the same chess piece? The sympathetic old rumor said that the originally annoyed expression also eased down, and turned to look at the Xiqing pond. Your girl doll is also interesting, sincere, and is a good cultivator. My chess piece does not distinguish between black and white, only one color, that is because waiting for a fate to hold the black piece to come and try. Shi Qingqi smiled and said, don't you play chess with you, you have to prepare your own pieces. The sympathetic old man smiled and shook his head, no longer talking, but turned around and shuffled the full set of chess pieces. Quickly, another game. Another old man who hadn't spoken finally said, come on. You have nothing to press me, you know? Let's come. This game may not be who wins or loses, hurry up. The sympathetic old man put on a posture and started a new round of fighting. Jian Wushuang did not speak, staring at the new round of chess. But soon, similar scenes were staged again, and the stubborn, murderous, and kind old man was defeated again. It shouldn't be, why did I lose again? He scratched his head, looking worried. There was a smug expression on Leng Yantao's face. Old things, you lost again, say what are you going to mortgage to me? The sympathetic old man looked mournful, reached out and rubbed his body around, and soon looked to Jian Wushuang for help. You can lend me the same thing and mortgage it to that old thing, then the old man will repay it. Jian Wushuang opened his mouth and finally said, What? Anything is fine, make a good connection. The gentleman looked at him. Since it was just anything, Jian Wushuang thought about it for a moment and took out a full-bodied pill from Neji. I'd like to ask you to reach out and rub Dan pills for 1 or 2. The gentleman said with a smile. Although it was a little weird, Jian Wushuang did the same, and then handed him the pill that had been rubbed by hand. The amiable gentleman hurled away and threw the Naden pill to the cold noodles gentleman. Quick leave. Leng Miandio took Dan Maru into his arms and got up and gave up his seat. Xiaoyu, how about let's kill a game while there is still some time? The genial gentleman also got up and gestured to him. Jian Wushuang, who stood aside with his arms folded, was a little stunned. This kind of invitation is a public sentence for him, a foul chess basket that can be easily defeated even by the ancient ancestors. That one is not good at playing chess, but he still doesn't step forward to show his ugliness. Jian Wushuang accosted a smile and waved his hands again and again. The sympathetic old man said with a smile, "It's okay, the worst is just to block the eyes, old man can take the next 2. Under such an invitation, Jian Wushuang is not good to quit anymore, and can only sit on his head. Xiaoyu, although this piece has only 1 color, but it has its own changes, only the player can see it." He smiled and pointed at the piece in the chessboard. Slowly spitting out a murky breath, Jian Wushuang pressed his finger into the chessboard, ingested a white piece, and then landed on the star position. There is no change in Baizi, is pure white as jade. The sympathetic gaze kept watching the settled piece tightly, but there was no change, and there was a touch of loneliness and disappointment in the depths of my eyes. But soon he returned to business as usual, holding his son and Jian Wushuang together. And this game of foreseeable ending before the start naturally ended a moment later with the defeat of Jian Wushuang. I lost. Jian Wushuang smiled helplessly. Why don't you, little friend, work hard in the future, and you will be able to wait for me to compete with each other. Awakening Fusu smiled. Jian Wushuang waved his hand and did not speak. They met and walked by for the occasion. After they left, they wanted to see them again. The sympathetic Tao said immediately, I owe something to the little friend. If I see each other again in the future, I will repay it twice. A piece of pill, although it is a treasure, is no different from ordinary things for Jian Wushuang. It is nothing, so he does not intend to take it back one day. Chapter 48:20. After listening to the thoughts in his heart and being amiable, he smiled and said, Little friends must not laugh, there must be a return. If it is not returned to you, it is unfair. Jian Wushuang knew that this argument would be fruitless, and he only laughed. This sea area was originally vast and unknown, but everyone just played a few games in this lonely boat, and there were signs of reaching the end. After watching the appearance of the void sky at the extreme point of the sea, Jian Wushuang looked at the sympathetic old road and asked, Old gentleman, take the liberty to ask, do you know where the Shanghuang sky is? Shiqing Qi suddenly looked tight, and the slender palm suffocated the little animal in his arms. It's over, it's completely exposed now, don't kill me. She cried in the bottom of her heart. The sympathetic old road immediately followed. Upper Wasteland is not far away from here. You only need to cross more than 10 heavens along the next journey to go up to Wasteland. Jian Wushuang arched his hands. Mr. Xie Lao pointed. When Shiqing Qi was stunned, she couldn't believe it, but then she took a sigh of relief and became proud. How about, I told you that it's coming soon, and you don't believe this. Before she finished speaking, she was glared back by I Ching. A game of chess is over, and the trip to the sea also ends soon. Jian Wushuang said goodbye, and then proceeded to the front with I Ching and Zikinki. At the end of the sea, under the huge hibiscus tree, the sympathetic old man stood on the bow of the boat and watched him disappear. Leng Miantao also went out with him, fighting side by side with him. The thing you asked him for, the luck attached to it was enough. I know, because I used a small method to borrow 200 years of luck from the little friend. If you think about it, you will have to pay him back twice. You old man, shut up for me, how can I still use you to teach? Leaving from the Fusang waterway, Jian Wushuang followed the words of the genial old Wei, and after passing through more than 10 dead heavenly planes, he finally saw a dark red heavenly plane. This was the main battlefield between the Emperor and the Emperor. The unimaginable Emperor's tendency is to burn the countless sky and the void, and countless souls perish. After Emperor Weiyang succeeded in annexing this place, he created a heavenly plane like purgatory to commemorate that war. And that plane of the heaven domain is also called Shanghuang by future generations. Such an iconic celestial field cannot be falsified and concealed, and this means that at most one more straightforward to the 100 celestial fields, it will arrive at the Dimitri sky where Gongzhigyo is located. This time the confrontation is probably more violent than the previous northern celestial state. Whether the silver bell with the sky-shaped bone armor finally escaped to Domitian, this question is still a question mark for Jian Wushuang. With just one sentence of that heroic woman, he would be in danger, and it was really crazy. After a moment of contemplation, Jian Wushuang looked at the cleansing pool beside him and said softly, "If there are another 100 celestial domains, you will reach Damien Tian, and your task has been completed." Shi Qingqi swallowed his throat. No, you have to throw me here. It wouldn't be thrown here. I will send you to a more prosperous sky later, and we will pick you up when we are done. She heard the words, shook her head like a rattle, and then pursed her mouth. No, I have to follow you even if it is dead, otherwise you will leave me alone in the heavens and ignore it. I can't go back. The place we are going to is very dangerous, and I have no time to care for you. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. Shi Qingqi hurriedly shook his head. You don't have to control me, just take me by my side, my family will protect me. Jian Wushuang wanted to say something more, and said in a clear way, take her, anyway, we are not responsible for life or death. You think about it. Jian Wushuang looked at her. Shi Qingqi nodded. Relax, I won't add to your confusion. The cold and dead void as they went forward began to have a lot of heaven on the way. But these heavens are similar to the little emperor's 6 heavens, and they have already shown a state of martial law. An emperor's son has fallen, which is a big event for the entire division, and the Emperor Zhenliang naturally cares the other 6 sons. It has been difficult to see Yan Xian in the void, and accordingly they should be more cautious, and they will not be found when they enter Dami. Nearly 100 vast expanse of heavens were thrown behind by Jian Wushuang, slowly showing in front of him. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to enter Domitian, dozens of killings suddenly burst from the dim void in front. He was instantly vigilant and wanted to quickly escape with the Qing and Shiqing pawns, but those killings came too quickly, but they ran into in a few breaths. However, Jian Wushuang's gaze also followed. In front of the dozens of piercing voids and carrying a heavy murderer, there is a shaky woman who seems to be likely to die at any time. And the woman, he was very familiar, was one of the 7 swordsmen who assassinated the son Mo, and finally told him the heroic woman who came to Dami Tian. Right now, this killing in the void is nearing its end. Facing the battle of nearly 10 Yanxian and more than 20 ancestors, how could she escape? Your son has orders, as long as you die, you can do it. Yanxian, headed by an angry drink, shook his arms at the same time, releasing thousands of waves of Yanli Huameng, and was about to hang it in place. The void is illuminated by Yanli, and all kinds of Yanli are like incapable cages, pressing down on her. The heroic woman's blood was in her mouth. At this last moment, she also stopped escaping and stood staring at those Yanxian coldly. At the next moment, there was almost no suspense in the situation, but a drastic change occurred. I saw a figure coming out of the air. Faced with the intertwining of countless horrors, he looked calm and raised his hand. Suddenly, the void shattered, and countless dark ink-like floods rushed out of the void, directly swallowing the entanglement of those intertwined landings. There are 7 tiny stars surging between his eyebrows, exuding an attractive trend. Once the stars appeared, it was a fairy. Only by mastering the immortal style can we directly crush Yanxian in the same realm. The fairy style of Jian Wushuang is called a little mountain. Between the mountains and rivers, everything is used by him to destroy all enemies. Faced with so many Yanxian and Dingxiu, he was not afraid and easily swallowed their Yanli moves. Then, he looked at the bruised British woman covered with scars. The eyes are opposite, her eyes are full of disbelief. She did not expect that he would come so fast, so fast. Chapter 48:21. At the next moment, Jian Wushuang raised his palm, and countless strands of Yanli Huameng shot terribly to a few points, forming a vast net, blocking her head. The gang wind raged, and several Yenxian had no time to dodge. They were directly twisted into a sieve, and the immortals were scattered. It was only in such a face-to-face that the team from the chase was instantly wiped out of 4 Yenxian and over 10 ancestors. All the remaining Yenxian were shocked by the fierce tactics, his eyes were panic, and the meaning of retreat came out. But instead of retreating, they stood still and stalemate with Jian Wushuang. Because behind them is the Dami Heaven Realm, which can be advanced and retreated, and the death order given by the Master has not been completed, and it is absolutely impossible to go back. Thinking of this, a middle-aged Yenxian tooth-headed close bite and said in a deep voice, "Visitors in front, here is the big Mitian, but the second realm under the Emperor, I wait for the Emperor to kill the remaining evil and hope not to block." Jian Wushuang removed his gaze from her and looked at those Yenxian Dingxiu. It's the best policy not to conflict with the entire Dimitri and the Sun, but everything that is going on suddenly makes things tricky. Killing several Yenxian first, it has already shown that it is impossible to want a hospice. Jian Wushuang did not speak, but looked at Yi Qing slightly and nodded. Di Qing also nodded and took a step forward slowly, as if the power of night was about to sweep forward. He just slowly lifted a palm up, gripping it across the air, and suddenly the void shattered. A clear vein, covered with heavy black scales, covered the heavy palm and pressed down. All Yenxian and Dingxiu are about to split. Even if it is too late to run Yanli, they are all under that palm and all die. He used 1 enemy and 2 to play the essence of De Yenxian in the same realm. The control of Yanli has reached the top. His blow is like a cloud cover, but he has not attracted any agitation of violent Yanli, directly and simply squeezed the fairy source of Yenxian. Then Qingqing withdrew his palms and returned to Jian Wushuang. Only the wind raged in the hazy void, and everything just seemed not to have happened. The heroic woman unconsciously stepped back and looked at Jian Wushuang and others with horrified eyes. After dispersing Yanli, Jian Wushuang quickly walked to her and said softly, "I haven't seen you for a long time." Slightly calming down the mood to escape from the dead, she said, How come you come so fast?" "Because I believe you didn't lie to me. I came," he said. "It seems that I came at the right time." Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, the heroic woman looked at him and said, "Thank you for your life-saving grace. I will return it in the future." "No need, you died in front of me. It's not good for me. There is a reason to save you." Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, "Now, we are about to enter the sky." There was some consternation in her eyes, and then she gritted her teeth. Are you going to assassinate the sun?" Jian Wushuang shook his head. "He and I have no grievances. Why should I kill him? I entered Demitian to find the silver bell and get something back." The heroic girl exhaled slowly and then said, "I'm afraid that today's silver bell, you want to be close to her, is not an easy task. Now she is under the seat of the sun. It seems that she really fled to this big sky." He frowned slightly. She said again, "Now she and her son are still close to each other. If you want to be close to her, you can only approach him." Jian Wushuang nodded, already thinking about the countermeasures. Is there any safest way to enter the sky? The northern celestial state is destroyed, and the son of the sun is killed. I think the other 6 emperors will be banned to varying degrees. At this point in time, I am afraid that it is not easy to enter the Dimitri. Ingqi women said, "The entire Dimitri, the dozens of heavens contained in it, are already under martial law." Jian Wushuang frowned. "Is there no secure route?" After she pondered for a while, she said, "Naturally, but I'm afraid you won't dabble easily." "Where?" "North Heavenly Territory, Baron Gu Ling Tai." Among the 7 emperors under Zhenuyang, The domain controlled by the second emperor is the most vast and vast. The entire Dimetion contains a total of 23 super-celestial realms, and the vast expanse can't be added. Even the sixth celestial realm of the little emperor's son can't be compared with it. There are 4 heaven gates from east to west, north and south, all of which can be accessed through the heaven gate, and they can be corrected by the court. It is said that there are 4 heavenly gates, but in fact there are only 3, and the other north heaven gate, that is, in the northern heaven, is completely silent. The entire north heaven territory is completely composed of tombs, and those silent and unknown tombs are left behind by the true Wuyang era, and are all the supreme powers that had been killed in battle. Although their immortal sources are scattered, the immortal bones still have terrible energy, and ordinary Yenxian can't set foot in it. Naturally, the North Celestial Domain does not have Yenxian stationed. These are all learned from the heroic woman's mouth. After learning of this news, Jian Wushuang did not hesitate, and went to buy Shanyu with Yiqing and Ziqingqi. Dimission's northern sky is in the extreme north, and the breath of death is extremely enough to infiltrate the void for most of it. There is no Yenxian and Dingxiu to come to this place. Here it is, north sky is ahead. In the boundless void, the heroic woman stood on her feet and looked forward. It was a dark field that was invisible to one side. I don't know how many years have passed, and the powers of those once supreme powers have all become master powers, wreaking havoc in the void. Only from here to enter the Big Meteon will not be discovered by the sun and the guards, but do not think that this is the safest and most secure place. In some ways, this is likely to be the most dangerous place. Such as, for example, my identity is not enough. I don't know anything about the things in this northern sky. I only know the dangers. I can't easily get involved. Jian Wushuang pressed his chin, thinking and saying, "No, I think you should be quite tall in this big sky in your identity, otherwise the sun will not let you perform the assassination mission." The heroic woman glared at him. "Huddy, if you go on, don't be afraid that I will get angry and tell your son to correct it?" Jian Wushuang smiled and calmly said, "If he really wants you to live, the previous scene will not happen. You have to know, who wants you to die most now?" The heroic girl fell silent, and immediately raised her head and said, "Come on, as long as I am not dead, I will take you into the heavens." "Okay, I'll thank you here." Jian Wushuang lowered her eyes and nodded. Chapter 48:22. Immediately afterwards, he seemed to remember something and asked, "Yes, I'm a little curious. What did Yinling take away from you before?" "The golden seal given to me by the sun, after she snatched it, used it as a way to open the way to Dimission." Jian Wushuang nodded. If she really said that, Yinling would probably have not left them since the North Celestial State was destroyed, but has been trailing and hiding in the dark, waiting for a certain time. But what makes Jian Wushuang unsure is why Yinling can guess that the heroic girl was sent by Dimitri, and then will take away the gold seal and come straight to Dimitri. By the way, did the group of Yenxian who previously sold Black Mountain crystals in northern Tianxians who have anything to do with you? The heroic girl said coldly, "I have nothing to say about everything that happened before." Jian Wushuang said again, "Also, what should I call it?" "Zhao Ting." Set foot in the northern sky, an ancient barren breath will come, and at the same time there is some kind of invisible force that is faintly pulling and dragging, traction and engulfing the whole body. The tombs like the Shenfeng peaks stretched silently, reaching the invisible distance. Rather than saying that these fairy tombs were built in Baishanyu, it is better to say that Baishanyu is composed entirely of fairy tombs. Because these ancient tombs are extremely dense, it is almost impossible to have a foothold, so Jian Wushuang and others flew at low altitudes in the northern sky and moved forward slowly. Although the owner of each fairy tomb has died, the former dynamism and the general trends still remain. Although it is irreversible, it is still powerful. Moreover, the lowest power in these fairy tombs is Yen Xian, and the existence of Dian Xian is not rare. No one spoke. Everyone raised the strength to the peak, and had already dealt with everything that might happen next. Shiqingqi was right next to Jian Wushuang, Not knowing whether it was intentional or unintentional, he squeezed the heroic woman named Zhao Ting apart. The little beast held in her arms seemed extremely excited, and seemed to be very interested in the breath of these fairy tombs, and he kept shaking his nose. "Sanqing, you can be honest with me, and then I will throw you down," Shiqing Qi threatened in a low voice. The little beast converged slightly, but still agitated in her arms. Jian Wushuang glanced at the little animal in her arms and asked, "What's the use of this little animal?" Zikinki nodded. "Sanqing was picked up in the mountains when I was a child. It is a dream taper which can swallow bad nightmares and dispel bad luck, so I have always carried it on my body. There will be good luck." Jian Wushuang nodded and continued to fly forward. The entire northern celestial field can be regarded as the larger celestial field in the Dami sky, and it takes a short time to cross. And the danger in Zhao Ting's mouth should be the disorderly force surging on the fairy tomb. As he continued to move forward, the dream taper in Zikinki's arms became more restless, and there was only excitement left in his clear eyes. At the next moment, the little beast suddenly rushed out of Shiqing Kai's arms, and the swift and fierce head like a swimming fish plunged into the fairy tomb community below. "Sanqing." Shiqing Qi was startled. Jian Wushuang also peeked into this abnormal scene. He waved his arm and Yanli Huameng shot away. Thousands of strands of Yanli Huameng are like a knot, and the dream taper suddenly turned back. When he opened his mouth, he directly swallowed that Yanli Huameng into his belly, and then stuck his head in the fairy tomb community. Jian Wushuang's brows were slightly frowned, and there was a bad hunch in his heart. The dream taper that fell in the fairy tomb group tweeted, and then raised its four claws and ran through it quickly. The dynamism that had been extremely chaotic to the extreme raged directly, and the entire northern sky was instantly ignited. "Damn something, I'm going to peel it alive." Di Qing was furious and lifted his palm to release Yen Li. "No." Jian Wushuang's deep voice stopped him from about to let go. "Can't do it, the breath here is not right." It seems that to confirm his words, the masterless forces in the entire northern sky are completely disordered and violent. As the initiator, the dream taper was running, and his mouth swallowed some unknown breath. Its snow-white body began to produce dense black lines, and the original figure of the arm's length also rose more than 10 feet in response to the storm. It's swallowing. Although those looking to the ancient power have fallen asleep, and the source of the fairy has been broken, but their charm is not so easy to dissipate. It will only dissipate in the extremely long years, and finally return to the heaven. Right now, the dream taper is engulfing the lordless way to strengthen itself. Zhao Ting was also horrified that such a turmoil occurred in the otherwise quiet North Tianyu, and Gongzi Jiao will inevitably realize that once they are discovered, they will never be able to escape. "Hurry on, I'm afraid the sun will know the turmoil here soon." Zhao Ting hurriedly urged. "I'm going to get Sanqing back." Zikinki has been startled by the 6 gods. Jian Wushuang frowned, looking at the dream taper who was still swallowing his soul. Almost at the same time, the state of Demission and Zhongzhou. Located in Sendai, above the sky, a lazy figure in a long white-toothed dress quietly opened its eyes and then looked north. He was the second emperor of Zhenluyang's seat, and the sun was correct. Soon, with several powerful shadows, she boarded Sendai. "His Royal Highness, there will be restlessness in the direction of Baishanyu, I am afraid." "I'm afraid what? The dead can't survive anymore?" The younger son even raised his eyelids. "You don't have to report the matter in the north sky, please leave it." The shadows promised and then retreated. "Right, pass Yinling, I want to see her." A palm fell down, and the unmatched force almost bound the dream taper, but still let it escape. Jian Wushuang also apparently lost some patience and began to prepare to kill him. Meng Tapi is greedy, and his belly seems to be a bottomless hole, even if he is escaping his life. With the swallowing, its shape has undergone tremendous changes. Especially its eyes. Under the original eyes, 2 slits were split, and a pair of eyes grew out of nowhere, which seemed extremely strange. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing joined forces to strangle, and the overwhelming force offensive also gradually forced it into a dead end. But at this moment, the change was abrupt, and the dreaming taper who was running away seemed to hit a layer of transparent enchantment head-on, and his body was cruel, and then he wailed and fell on the floor. Chapter 48-23. At the same time, the ground was collapsing and a series of ravines began to crack. Jian Wushuang and others in the chase also stopped their bodies and looked forward. Among the countless fairy tombs, the one in the center of the eyes is several times larger than the ordinary fairy tombs, as if several peaks are stacked together, revealing unpredictable oppression. The dream taper was planted in front of this fairy tomb. At this moment, along with the collapse of the ground, the fairy tomb also began to crack, apparently about to collapse. Go! Zhao Ting was already extremely nervous. Looking at this unpredictable scene, Jian Wushuang did not want to be suspected, even if he had to escape. I'm afraid I can't go away. Di Qingsheng sighed, and then looked behind him. I saw the originally silent fairy tombs cracked one after another, and a fairy bone with no consciousness came out of the tomb, and the unsteady soaring to the void blocked the way of several of them. How is it possible? Looking at this scene, Jian Wushuang was a little unbelievable. The owners of these immortal bones have long since died many years ago, and can no longer die. Both from the immortal source and the immortal body, they have dissipated and do not have the conditions for recovery. Even if they were guarding the heavenly court of Emperor Liu Yao, the fairy bones of the three Dianxian were also allowed to continue to guard because of a certain obsession. But right now, these fairy bones, who are still in the fairy tomb, are all recovering, and they are surrounded by layers, never less than thousands. Only killed. Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, and an invisible long sword had condensed in his hands. Di Qing was also ready to respond, and a pair of golden eyes began to search. With a sigh, Zhao Ting drew a slender straight knife from his waist to prepare for the response. More and more fairy bones crawled out of the fairy tomb. They were unconscious but all came together. Jian Wushuang no longer hesitated. A sword slashed out, the unmatched sword burst into the immortal bone. Jinny pushed flatly and emptied a large area in an instant. There is no fairy source at all, and fairy bones without consciousness can easily cause damage. Infinite quantity. Di Qing also drank with a deep voice, and a black ebony phase emerged from his back, and then faced up against the mountain-like fairy bones. The North Celestial Territory was trembling, countless fairy tombs were damaged, and the fairy bones fell into the ground like rain. However, this is just the beginning. The largest immortal tomb in the center was finally broken. At the same time, thousands of treasures emerged from the tomb and stirred the sky dome. A figure as high as several feet, wearing a rotten robe, walked out of the fairy tomb. There was a whisk behind his back, and a thin sword in the palm of his thin, black hand held a real sword. His cheeks are his ruined and pale skin can see the bones inside. His eyes were shriveled and equally gray, without any breath. Various signs indicate that this old way of carrying the dust and holding the true sword of Baoguang has already disappeared. A type of ancestral art power Tianmen cleared hundreds of immortal bones in front of him. Jian Wushuang looked dignified at the figure coming out of the immortal tomb. The old figure gave him an extremely dangerous atmosphere. He could naturally detect the dead air that flowed around the old figure, but the more so, the more vigilant he must be. Once obsessed, even if you become a bone, it is quite terrible, and this old way of knowing how many years the body disappeared is definitely several times stronger than the guardian bone in front of the Six Raven Emperor's heavenly court. Di Qing's eyes were also dignified, because he also sensed a dangerous breath. The northern chaos, which was originally chaotic as the battlefield, suddenly died for a moment, and everyone looked at the front. The old man who carried the dust and took the Baoguang true sword took a step forward, and then reached out to remove the dust behind. The voice of the old man followed. I walked out of Huang Quan, perturbed the banner and summoned the old ministry to wipe out all the enemies in front of me. He said, waving his hands to whisk the dust, and the whole North Heavenly Territory became turbulent again. Flicking dust seems to have a magic sound, swaying to every fairy tomb. At this moment, the originally crushed fairy bones slowly creeped and recondensed, and at the same time, thousands of fairy tombs cracked, and a fairy bone came out. There are 5,000 immortal bones, and 5,000 immortal bones that belonged to Yan Xian during their lifetime. Even if they were dead, they still carried an unparalleled trend. Lao Dao holds the real dust sword, and his shriveled and pale eyes are gradually filled with scarlet. Jian Feng pointed out that my old part will be suppressed. He pointed his sword forward, and the sharp blade pointed at Jian Wushuang and others. In an instant, the immortal bones, which were originally unconscious, seemed to get some kind of induction, all like floods, surrounded from all sides. Jian Wushuang led the sword and used it directly, the first form of Xinghe Jianyani, Xingjiani cut straight forward, with an incomparable trend of violently tearing the fairy bones, and at the same time, Jinni Mang Pillar broke out completely, almost emptying one side in an instant. Di Qing is also not weak at all. It belongs to the strength of Jiu Zhuan Dian Immortal. On the collision of the immortal bones, it is almost as easy as dying. His strength has reached the apex. The two joined forces, and all the fairy bones could not step forward, let alone close. Seeing this scene from afar, the scarlet eyes moved slightly, and he waved again. With the waving of the dust, countless broken fairy bones began to recoagulate. They are mixed together, and gradually condense a party of thousands of miles of fairy bones. The phalanx is so powerful that it has already taken shape and wrapped the swordsman and others in it. Countless masterless forces, violent and disordered, rose from the fairy bone formation, as if they were huge white bone palms, constantly pulling them. Jian Wushuang's heart was in crisis, and he didn't want to cut a sword above the magic circle under him. However, without any unfavorable sword intent, is like a mud bull entering the sea, silently. The swallowed fairy bones are more and more, and the fairy bone array becomes stronger and stronger. At the same time, the old man holding the real dust and Baoguang real sword appeared in front of the magic circle, and then he held up the real sword with enthusiasm in his hand and suddenly stabbed into the magic circle. This sword went straight to the beginning of Qing. His golden eyes were dignified, and then he shot to resist. Buzz! A Hong Zongde-like Shenshengche was thorough, taking a serious step back, and at the same time Jian Wushuang also shot, he relayed, and the invisible real sword was cut in the palm, in order to resolve that terrible sword. The two swords are opposed to each other, and half of the sword in tension has been offset by I Ching, and then they are rejected by Jian Wushuang. The fairy bones fell silent. Retreating to the right palm of Qingqing slightly trembling, I saw that between the right palm he resisted, it was already bloody. Chapter 48-24. The prosperity of the old sword actually hurt him. You have to know that Di Qing is already Jiu Zhuan Dian Immortal and is at the top of the list. Even Dayang Xian in the same realm can hardly hurt him. But in this face-to-face, the old saying that he walked out of Huangquan was just a light sword, hurting him. Not only is it Qing, after Jian Wushuang dismissed that sword, the inscrutable sword intention also made his body blood and tumbling. This understatement of the sword made them suffer to varying degrees. Then Huangquan's old road did not stop at all, and the Baoguang true sword stabbed again in the hand. Qingqi! Shen Qingxing said the idea, and an uncoverable Chongshao Damong surged from behind him. A pure white Baiwu condensed, a pupil as holy as a snow lotus had a charm, and then resolutely hit the old Huangquan road. Seemingly feeling threatened, he took a step back and swiped the dust with his left hand. In an instant, hundreds of millions of strands of white silk fluttering like strips of long snakes, facing the white Wubao. When the two collided, the white Waboxiang hadn't even had time to release its momentum yet, and it was entangled by hundreds of thousands of strands of white silk. Jian Wushuang's brow furrowed, and he turned to look at the pale Zhao Ting and Shi Qingqi beside him. After a while, I will try my best to tear this circle apart, and you will have as far as you can go. Zhao Ting looked at him and opened his mouth but said nothing. Shi Qingqi's eyes were reddish, and Nua said, "Sorry, I'm wrong." I can do it myself. Jian Wushuang finally looked at her, carrying the invisible long sword, and resolutely moved forward. Di Qing looked solemn and said in a deep voice, although this old Tao has already died, but the energy contained in his body is extremely abundant, I am afraid that his fairy source has not been consumed. Jian Wushuang looked at the front with dignified eyes. If the judgment is correct, then Huangquan Lao Dao is very likely to be the peak of 9 de Yenxian, which is in the same situation as Di Qing. And Huangquan's old ways are far from being a single fight. More and more fairy bones tear the fairy tomb and walk out of the fairy tomb. Let him dispatch the messenger. This entered the first battle of Demitian. I am afraid it is quite tricky. After Di Qing's blow was offset by the white dust from the dust, Huangquan's Tao no longer fought, but retreated quickly, waving the dust in his hand. The dust seemed to have some kind of enchanting magic sound, and those fairy bones flew over from all directions again. Don't let these things near me, I went to pick up the old head. Di Qing said looking at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang nodded his head, releasing the unmatched force directly in his palm. Each strand was enough to crush a fairy bone. I Qing's body shape no longer stayed, and suddenly a pair of wings with gold lines around him loomed over the sky. Facing the old saying of Huangquan, he no longer released the treasure, but shook the wings behind him. In an instant, countless, like the mountains and seas, the dynamism will burst out completely. There are hundreds of millions of golden feathers, with an unimaginable breadth. The heavens and the punishment are generally falling. Every golden feather is destroyed, the dead air on the sky is swallowed, and a shocking big hole is burned, and everything is illuminated. This is the full-strength form of Di Qing, an unreserved form. Boom! Master Huangquan raised his head and looked at the sky-destroyed Jinyu, waving the dust in his hand. Fuchen by sea stretched for thousands of miles in an instant, and turned into a party to protect himself. At this moment, the earth was torn, and countless immortal bones were burned up by the falling golden feathers, and they burned up together with the earth. The dust-bound enchantment built by Huangquan's masters, even though it was sturdy again, was still unable to contend with the golden feather that carried the mountain sea trend. After the dust enchantment was torn open, the sky-like golden feathers were like locusts, and they rushed to Huangquan's old road. The indescribable martyrdom centered on him, tearing the north heavenly domain directly from the middle, and the plain will be torn apart. The energy dissipated by this kind of escape cannot be sustained under Yen Xian. Jian Wushuang reached out to protect the Qingting pool Zhao Ting behind them, and then prepared to break the formation under him. At the next moment, the old man resounded like Hong Zhongda Lu's voice. Set! He held the invisible sword and prepared to push it horizontally. He only felt that his body was blessed with some kind of shackles, and he even directly interrupted his control of Yanli. Even Qing above the void was affected, and his figure trembled, and he landed uncontrollably. The world is silent, only the burning fire spreads. Whispering white silk enchantment retreats, revealing Huangquan's old figure. At this time, he was not embarrassed, his gray skin was burned into large holes, revealing the horrible bones, and one of the two eyeballs also burst, even more terrible. Thief, dare to insult me? He was furious, and his rotten robe, even with the dust in his hands, turned to ashes. Today, I will ask you to turn into nourishment in my Huangquan Fatian array. The deafening voice stopped, and Huangquan's old right hand held the sword, turning into a sensational bone in his left hand. Immediately, the large array of immortal bones trapped by Wushuang Jian, Di Qing and others slowly rotated. Uncountable broken fairy bones rise and fall in it, with fierce extreme murderousness and death energy. These countless Yenxian powers that once fought in the quartet and died here, even the dead bones after death, have been refined and become the nourishment of the great array. This is a fierce battle. Along with Huangquan's old ways, this Huangquan Fatian array began to fluctuate and became like a quagmire. The feet began to become muddy, and at the same time a pair of white bones palms protruded, madly grasping at Jian Wushuang and others. There was also a strong blood of God, and it immediately rushed up. We are all nourishment, commemorates the souls of my dead subordinates. Huang Quan's old voice chanted lowly, accompanied by his voice. The blood of the entire Huangquan Fatian array completely wiped the sword Wushuang and others. Swallowed then boiled. There are still immortal bones coming out of the immortal tomb, and they rushed towards the magic circle without turning back and merged into it, becoming a part and a strong formation. The boiling and viscous blood of God is like a tianhe falling from the sky dome, ugly and ugly. Huang Quan Laodao looked at this scene with only one eye left. He seemed very satisfied, and then moved forward. At the next moment, the blood river in Huangquan Fa Tianjin trembles suddenly, and then a figure emerges quietly. He wasn't soaked with blood stains all over his body. Gao Qing held up an invisible long sword in his hand, drawing bows and arrows like shooting the sun, and his arm's tension was rounded to the extreme. At the next moment, the invisible long sword was suddenly thrown out, as if the arrows shot by the god's bow were anxious, with a forward-looking trend. The sky trembles. Wherever the sword front passes, the void is broken. Chapter 48-25. The blood river was divided into two sections, and the invisible sword finally pierced the boundary of the Huangquan Fatian array and nailed into the heart of Huangquan's old road, bursting. The unparalleled glare shines, illuminating the decayed northern sky for a moment. The martyrdom continued, and Huangquan Fatian array was punctured and collapsed at a very fast rate. Standing above the blood river that is about to wither, Jian Wushuang slowly spit out a cloud of breath, and a secret red light flashed away in his left hand. It is the fairy bones and the blood river that build the Huangquan Fatian array. The blood river is formed by the condensing murderous and dead air, which can easily infiltrate the soul of the gods and cause the siege to be lost. But there was one thing that made Jian Wushuang and others easily evade the blood swallowing. That thing, Sha Qing, the lord of Sand Devil's Cave, was handed to Jian Wushuang's slap blood-red skull when he was dying. The blood-red skull's absorption and induction of blood gas has exceeded imagination. Even if he was sealed in the Boyang bottle, he still flew out of control, and the whale swallowed the infinite murderous blood and blood gas in the blood river. This is something that Jian Wushuang didn't think of. The originally very difficult Huangquan Fa Tian array was also depleted of its foundation, so it was easily destroyed. Replug the skull into the Boyang bottle. Jian Wushuang's eyes looked forward. Standing in front of him, Qing looked at him with shocking eyes, destroyed the magic circle with his own strength, and directly killed the old Tao of Huangquan, who was a big Yanxian. How could it not surprise him? A small realm is an insurmountable gap, let alone a gap between Yanxian and Dianxian? But that's how it happened. Jian Wushuang used the power of Yanxian to kill Dianxian by leapfrog. It seems that my cognition is still just the tip of the iceberg for you. Di Qing looked at him and sighed slightly. Jian Wushuang couldn't explain too much, just said, "It's just a coincidence." Shi Qingqi is completely a shocked look. Zhao Ting looked at his back in a complicated way, and did not know what to think about. The thick smoke waves from the martyrdom slowly dissipated, and then a body with almost no human form appeared. Under the blow of Jian Wushuang, the entire left half of the fairy body of Huang Quan Laodao was completely destroyed. In his shriveled chest cavity, there really is a group of immortal sources that will be destroyed. He did not die, although the fairy source is about to break, but still provides him with unimaginable dynamism. Huang Quan was angry and used his last power to throw the Baoguang true sword out of his hand. With a real sword of endless dark blood, cut it at a speed so fast that it can't dodge at all. Heaven and earth changed their colors, everything was in a blink of an eye, and even Qing did not react. Jian Wushuang saw the most real thing. When the real sword broke through the clouds, he almost subconsciously pushed away his face. Laugh. The Baoguang true sword with infinite blood and murderousness accidentally stabbed into the left chest of Jian Wushuang, and came out through the chest, and the tearing blood spewed out. "Adult!" shouted Shi Qingqi. Di Qing was also completely shocked, but he reacted in an instant and directly released the most terrifying trend in front of Huang Quan. A total of 3 black, white, and red Trinity ancestral treasures, all of which represent I Ching's full blow rolling forward. Huang Quan, who had broken Xianyuan, was finally extinct under this blow. He completely died, even with the entire northern sky territories dead, countless of the fairy bones that came out of the fairy tomb, no traction, so they fell to the ground one after another. The entire north sky territory was completely dead. Jian Wushuang slowly leaned back and was dragged by both Shi Qingqi and Zhao Ting at the same time. The blood of God with a faint gold streak was flowing from the back of his heart, and his pupils slowly enlarged. "It will be okay, it will be okay." The cleaning pool murmured, the blood flowing out of her fingers. Huang Qing, who had already destroyed Huang Quan's old ways, quickly looked at Jian Wushuang with dignified eyes, and then pressed his palms against his broken chest. With a ray of vigorous strength, he tried to repair his chest. Jian Wushuang Kuei suddenly opened his eyes and said slowly, "Leave this place as soon as possible and rush to the territory of Domitian." After leaving this sentence, he passed out again. Noble nodded, grabbed Jian Wushuang directly from the second female, and ran straight to the north sky. Zhao Ting and Shi Qingpa followed immediately. After entering the northern heavenly field full of immortal tombs, it was considered to have entered the hinterland of Domitian. The originally hazy sky dome disappeared, replaced by a bright and vigorous sky. That fierce battle almost smashed the entire Baishanyu, and finally attracted nearly 100 guards to go to Baishanyu to investigate. Passing by the guards of Yanxian and Dingxiu, the face is dignified. Jian Wushuang is now seriously injured, and he must find a secluded cave to recuperate, so as not to leave an indelible dark disease. Immediately afterwards, Diqing was nearby, looking for a hole in the sky that was relatively thin and hard to detect, so he swept away. The clouds gradually thinned out, and a total of 7 fairy peaks like fairy mountains came into view. Holding the essence of Jian Wushuang, he directly selected the largest and magnificent immortal mountain among the 7 lotus peaks and arrived. Boom! He waved his palm directly and opened a small hole in the side of the lotus peak. Several people turned around and entered it. Holding the head of Jian Wushuang, Qingshou took the brunt and entered the small cave, but soon he was stunned. Zhao Ting and Shi Qingpan also stopped on the spot. I saw directly in front of them, in the depths of this small hole, a young man in a shabby gown was scared to sit on the ground with his legs crossed, and he was reading at www. Akanshu. Calm looking at them in horror. Beside this young man, some precious treasures were scattered, apparently just scattered. Diqing soon understood what was going on. It turned out that this lotus peak was not an unowned thing, and it was obviously a blessed place for this young man to practice. But even if this lotus peak is the possession, but hit him to enter here is to change the Lord. In the eyes of Diqing, a secret flash of murderous opportunity emerged, killing a guy who was nothing but a fairyland. For him, it was simply no easier. Just as he was about to start, Jian Wushuang, who had been comatose, opened his eyes quietly and he said, "He can't kill." Although he didn't understand it, Diqing still restrained the killing in his heart and looked at the disappointed young man with a deep voice, "Get out of time and get out." After hearing this sentence, a young man with a gray face, like amnesty, no matter how busy this is, he nodded, and at the same time quickly picked up some of the top treasures that fell on the ground to escape. Chapter 48:26. Throwing those treasures into his arms with all his hands and feet, the young man would rush out of the sky. But immediately, Zikinki did open his arms to stop his way. "You can't let him go, otherwise the safety of the adults can't be guaranteed." The young man heard the words and closed his eyes in a hurry. "You can rest assured that I haven't seen anything, and nothing will be passed on." Diqing also realized something, directly released the Yanli rope to hug him, and thrown it into the depths of this small hole. The young man, who fell heavily on the ground, like a frightened rabbit, spoke in a panic. "My lords, Imwei Liujia is a good person. I am diligent in this big lonely mountain. I haven't even fallen down once every Chinese New Year. God can clearly understand my sincerity. I am loyal to the second emperor, Wu, Too lazy to listen to his nonsense, Di Qing blocked his mouth again and used the force to transform the whip and slashed him to count the whip, only to be honest. Suddenly it was silent for a few days, and Qing Qing placed the unconscious sword Wushuang on a flat ground before he began to investigate his condition. Under this view, even Qing Qing was a little surprised. Jian Wushuang's original fragmented body, and even the internal organs were almost empty of the fairy body. At this moment, it has been restored. The shocking wound is also visible to the naked eye. The speed is repairing. Moreover, his breath has gradually stabilized from the previous fluctuations, and a complete recovery is only a matter of time. What a freak, this guy! Di Qing murmured in disbelief. The cleaning pond also came forward at this time, and his eyes were still slightly reddish. Adult's situation. He's fine, and it doesn't matter for a while. Di said coldly. He was obviously more disgusted with this almost culprit woman. Then can I take care of adults? She whispered. No. Di Qing responded coldly. He doesn't have to take care of him, he will recover soon. The cleaning pool is promised and the lost return. As time went by, the cave in the fairy mountain fell silent within a day. I don't know how long it passed. A slight cry, a little excitement sounded from far and near outside the cave. Suddenly, a figure with more than enough size suddenly ran into the sky, and the snow-white hair was dotted with incomprehensible dark dense lines. It was a dream taper in Shiqing Pond, and it was also the culprit that awakened all the fairy bones in the fairy tombs of the northern heaven. At the moment, he jumped into the sky, and his 4 dark eyes directly saw its owner, and he was thrilled when he was excited. But it was a powerful foot in response to it. Almost 10% of the effort was used to clean the pool and kick it out with 1 foot. At the same time, while Zhao Ting hadn't responded, he directly withdrew the saber from her waist and cut it towards Meng Tappy. But in the end, the long knife that circulated Yanli did not fall, but hovered over Meng Tapio's head. Shiqing Kai's eyes turned red, watching it coldly. Get out, I will no longer be your master from now on. Meng Tap whispered in a low voice, and her front paws swayed unsteadily on the ground. It didn't understand why his master suddenly became so cold. It whimpered and went forward on its lower body, only this time, it was a sharp long knife that responded to it. Cut it with a knife, and tore a wound directly on Meng Tap's neck. Go. Shiqing Qi said coldly, his long knife pointing out of the sky. Meng Tappy whimpered, lying motionless. At this time, a tired voice slowly sounded, Forget it, the things that have passed are gone, and the wisdom of a small animal is not yet civilized, and it is also reasonable. Jian Wushuang sat up slowly and coughed again. Sir, you're awake. Shiqing Qi was surprised, and his long knife stood on the ground, and he was a little embarrassed. It's not good to sleep again. He shook his head helplessly. I Ching, who had been sitting next to him, gave him a careful look, then raised his eyebrows slightly. It's still pretty good. Jian Wushuang smiled. Fortunately, I didn't hurt the source, and the recovery was smooth. After he finished speaking, he looked around slowly. Are we here now? I Ching replied. Among the vastness of the hinterland, the northern heaven has already left. It seems to be quite smooth. This small hole is pretty good. Although the strength is thinner, it is also a good go-to dojo. Jian Wushuang looked around and nodded. This small cave has hidden winds and condensed water in the day, and although the layout is a bit cold, it is still elegant, and its owner is obviously stylish. As he was about to take his gaze back, Yu Guang suddenly glanced at the corner of the wall and there was a figure almost with Songzi. And the dumplings stared at them, looking at them in horror. This is? Jian Wushuang was puzzled. When Qingwen heard the words, he held out his hand, and the figure wrapped in dumplings rolled over, and at the same time removed the Yanlian chain from his mouth. Seeing this, the sullen young man hurriedly closed his eyes and said something in his mouth. I didn't see anything, and I didn't know how many people were there. I beg your adults to put it down. Jian Wushuang couldn't help crying and laughing. Nothing, open my eyes and let me see. The young man heard the words and finally opened his eyes slowly. Are you the master of this hole? He asked. The young man nodded. You reading www. Ukanshu. Kam's voice trembled a little. Below is the second mountain owner of this big lonely mountain, Wei Liujia. Wei Liujia? Good name. Jian Wushuang nodded with a smile, and said, how many mountain owners like you are in this vast sky? This rogue young man named Wei Liujia, like the pour of beans, spoke of the old bottom. There are dozens of heavens in the entire Damian heaven, but there are only 17 caves like Xianshan cave like me, and only there are 17 mountain owners, and the mountain owners are hereditary. They cannot be led by others. Jian Wushuang touched his chin. 17 caves and 17 mountain owners. It seems that your identity is relatively high in this vast sky, right? Wei Liujia heard the words and flashed a look of embarrassment. The identity of Lord Dong Tianshan is certainly high, but my father died at a young age, and only left me the seat of this big Gushan mountain. Speaking of the Lord of the Cave of Heaven, in fact, the entire Dagushan cave is just a polished pole for me, plus every Chinese New Year is to be worshipped, and my father has never left a little treasure. Below, I became the bottom of the 17 caves, not to be seen by any monks. Chapter 48:27. There was an awkward atmosphere in the cave of Daegu Mountain. Jian Wushuang once again looked at this simple cave. Except for a few dilapidated futons that were almost patched, all other feng shui scenes were purely natural. Only then did he confirm that he was not lying, and it was really poor. No, are you as poor as a yen xian? Jian Wushuang made an unconscious attempt. Wei Liujia was very injured, and the expression on his face was almost embarrassed. That, because I am just a little yen xian, and I have no great ability to gather money, I can only live by this big lonely mountain. Such a twist, plus the order of the emperor, the mountain owners should not leave their respective jurisdictions without authorization, so they are so poor. I used to ask other Yenxian to ask for some treasures of precious treasures, and I plan to plant some seeds for the coming of the Chinese New Year. If you don't live, you can only grow some mortals, so after 1 or 2 visits, it becomes the situation you see. Speaking of this, Wei Liujia raised his head and looked at Jian Wushuang nervously. Several adults, you all also see that Wei Mao is really poor. Even if he bears his clothes, he can't squeeze a little treasure, and he also invites the adults to open the net. Jian Wushuang was also understandable at this time. The young Yen Xian named Wei Liujia now inherited his father's title and got the title of the mountain owner. But because of his bad luck and various other reasons, he finally fell into such a bad position that he couldn't even recruit talents, and could only become a polished rod in his own territory. You can rest assured that I will never covet your anything, but just borrow the treasure land for a little rest, and then leave. Jian Wushuang finished, motioned to let Qing Qing loosen the rope of strength on him. After the rope was untied, the things that were originally hidden in Wei Liujia's arms were scattered all over the place. Looking closely, they are all treasures of various sizes, with dozens of pieces, with various starbursts flashing, which is barely acceptable. The air froze, Wei Liujia's mouth twitched, and cold sweat poured from his temples. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. Hurry up, you'll just wait for a little rest here, and it's not a robber who robs people of treasure. Wei Liujia echoed again and hurriedly put those treasures back into his arms. After he packed up the treasures, Jian Wushuang reminisced on the previous conversation, and soon realized what was happening, and he asked, "What did you say? You have to go to the confession every Chinese New Year. That is the confession, but is the second emperor the son, correct?" Wei Liujia nodded his head. Jian Wushuang's and Su Zus formlessly shortened the distance between them, plus the almost repair came to Daegu Mountain to visit, so that he had no one to tell, so he opened the conversation box unconsciously. "Yes, I have to go to Tiangong to make confession every Chinese New Year." Jian Wushuang heard his heart and moved his heart. After glancing at I Ching, he asked again, "Did the confession of this year's Chinese year begin or not?" "Not yet," Wei Liujia shook his head. Every Chinese New Year's confession was started after the second emperor attended the heavenly feast. Somehow this year's Korean confession was delayed somehow, but it will start in another 3 years. Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up, which was simply dozing off, and immediately put on the pillow. Originally, he was still having a headache how to approach the young man to correct it. Now the problem was solved immediately. As the saying goes, the thin camel is bigger than the horse. Even though Wei Liujia was crowded out by the rest of the mountain owners, he was also able to go straight to the Tiangong Palace and meet the master. Only this one is what Jian Wushuang urgently needs. If you go to Tiangong with him to get close to Gongzizing, you will have a fairly well-known and undetectable identity. As long as that Yinling is beside Gongzizing or nearby, she will surely be able to find her whereabouts. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang said, "If we want to go to the Tiangong with you and see the young man to correct it, can we?" Wei Liujia was stunned and soon turned his face. "I'm afraid it's not very good. The Tiangong is heavily guarded. Everyone who goes to the tribute will be thoroughly investigated in case." He didn't say the second half of the sentence, but Jian Wushuang knew what he was thinking. If you take them to the Tiangong, if there are any consequences and problems, they will definitely not be able to bear him. As Jian Wushuang prepared to continue to persuade him, Zhao Ting, who had not spoken in the distance, slowly walked forward. Wei Liujia looked up subconsciously, and suddenly he shuddered, and stood up straight to salute Zhao Ting. Wei Liujia, the lord of the lonely Daegu mountain, saw and met Zhao Tingguan. "Do you recognize me?" Zhao Ting came to him and asked quietly. "When, of course, you are the Tianguan next to the second emperor, and the low office must be kept in mind." Wei Liujia said aloud. Zhao Ting nodded and said, "I also recognize you, and I am most impressed, and I can still remember it now." His eyes lit up. Cheng Meng Zhao Tianguan remembered the humble office. "Of course remember, you are the most unique of the 17 mountain owners." Zhao Ting smiled slightly. Is that?" Wei Liujia looked embarrassed, and naturally understood the meaning of Zhao Ting's words. Every time during this Chinese New Year, the confession made him look so different every time that he would not come to Taiwan. Of course it would be impressive. If there is no accident, this time the Tiangong dynasty confession will make his appearance. Zhao Ting naturally didn't know what he was thinking and then said, "They are all my colleagues. Because I have something important to do, I can't go to Tiangong recently. Can you take them to Tiangong to make confessions?" Although Zhao Ting is asking, his tone is not to be discussed. Although her words were full of loopholes, calm, but Wei Liujia did not dare to disobey her and had to resign. "Go back to Zhao Tianguan, the master of Daegu Mountain Wei Weijia can." Zhao Ting nodded, then looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang returned her positive look, then stood up and walked to Wei Liujia. "Brother Wei, let's go to the confession. Can you prepare any gifts for the second emperor?" Wei Liujia heard the words, suddenly sweating again, and his face was very embarrassed. "Precise, the preparation is ready, but whether it can satisfy the second emperor is another." "Can that make me take a look?" Jian Wushuang smiled. But he had a complex look, and slowly stretched his hands into his arms. After a while, some of the treasures he hid in his arms were picked out one after another, hovering carefully in the air. After seeing these treasures prepared for the second emperor, Jian Wushuang finally believed, Wei Liujia, really poor. Chapter 48-28. Those that can be found even by ordinary top-level cultivation and disdain for the practice of Tao, there are as many as 4 copies, and occupy 40% of these treasures. There are 13 treasures in his collection, each of which can only be said to be terrible. Apart from the Taoist book, there are some treasures that cannot be named. However, Wei Liujia is still a family of treasures, and he introduced them to Jian Wushuang one by one. This is Yushu Liuli Zun, Luang Jinyu Ring. 13 treasures that can be seen slightly, but only that one Yushu Liuli Zun is of some value, can warm the meridians, and has a better use for restoring the strength. But Rao is so. I am afraid that the effect of Yushu Liuli Zun is not as good as a black mountaintop crystal. Wei Liujia wiped the virtual sweat on his head. These are all the babies I bought from the real sword that my father left me. I hope the confession will not be ugly this time. Jian Wushuang already had no idea what to say. If these things, which were barely treasured, were brought to the Tiangong Palace and in front of the two emperors, then the mockery and humiliation of Wei Liujia would be inevitable. Thinking of this, he looked at Wei Liujia, and when he turned his palm, a small wooden box appeared and handed it over. "You and I are destined. I will give you some gadgets today." Despite Wei Liujia's doubts, he still reached out and took the small Shimu box he had delivered. At the next moment, he gently opened the box body, and thousands of soft white awns escaped from the box, with a strong and extremely medicinal fragrance, illuminating the entire small cave for a moment. Gutter! A clear swallowing sound rang through everyone's ears. Wei Liujia's eyes were straight, and he looked straight at the pill in the small box of Shimu in his hand. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly, and his reaction seemed to have been expected. This kind of pill was taken by the three people of spring and autumn from the heaven of the 6 Crow Emperors. It was collected by the emperor and belongs to the top treasure. Even the ordinary Dian immortal may not be able to take a look. Each one is a world of luck. Right now this Emperor Zongdan pill has a magical effect on solid foundations and perception of immortality. Even Jian Wushuang is particularly fond of this immortality. In the end, Wei Liujia reluctantly withdrew his gaze, then closed the box and shook his head. "The value of this kind of pill is too expensive. I am afraid I can sell all of my Daegu Mountain, and I can never buy it. I can't close." Jian Wushuang Wenyan smiled slightly. "Accept it. Don't you want to use this pill to make a good face when you go to the Tiangong this year?" His sentence directly poked the deepest pain in Wei Liujia's heart, reminding him of all the humiliation since taking over as the mountain owner. For a time, the palm of his hand stretched out, and he held the box tightly again, and his joints were pale. "Miss you. Just think about it, take the opportunity to grasp it." Jian Wushuang smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "Then we will go to Tiangong 3 years later." For 3 years, for Yan Xian, it was just a snap. Within these 3 years, Jian Wushuang, Di Qing and others did not leave the small cave in the big lonely mountain in one step. They were all rearing and adjusting their strength to the peak. There is only one Yanxian who has not closed his eyes for a moment in 3 years. That Yanxian is Wei Liujia. For 3 years, I kept the box gifted to him by Jian Wushuang, and was even careful to open it. I was afraid that it would suffer some kind of loss. Looking at Wei Liujia, who was almost going crazy, Jian Wushuang could not see it, and gave him 4 Dizong Dan Maru with the same grade but different utility. Therefore, Wei Liujia almost passed out with excitement, and the first thing after he was awake was to bow his head, but was stopped by Jian Wushuang. After a simple entrustment, he restrained his leaping fairy source. 3 years have passed, and a distinctive morning bell and drum sound resounded from the sky corner. In the small cave of Daegu Mountain, Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes. "Sir, we should start our journey." Wei Liujia seemed to have been waiting for a long time, and his uncontrollable joy appeared on his face. Jian Wushuang nodded, then stood up, and Di Qing followed him step by step. The candidates for this trip to Tiangong to meet Gongzi Jiao have already been determined. Only Jian Wushuang and Tai Qing and Wei Liujia are the 3. As for Jian Ting's decision, Zhao Ting didn't let her follow her, but stayed with Shiqing Pond in the cave of Daegu Mountain. This decision is made, on the one hand, because more people are more likely to be exposed in the celestial palace corrected by the sun, on the other hand, because Jian Wushuang does not believe her. How can it be a simple Yanxian if he can correct the position of Tianzi and be sent to assassinate him? "Adult, can Qing Qi go with you?" Shiqing Qi said nervously, rubbing his clothes corner nervously. Jian Wushuang glanced back at her. "Relax, I will come back to pick you up and take you home after I finish my work." At this point, the 3 bodies left the sky and turned into 3 streamers and flew away. While rising directly into the clouds, Jian Wushuang also noticed that at the same time, there was a strong breath from all the heavens, and he flew towards the same place. That was the most central part of the entire Damien, and it was the Palace of the Sun. As a mountain host different from Tianyu, its status is quite high in Domitian. Each mountain host is the lowest in Yanxian realm, which is equivalent to the final card of the sun. In other words, even if Wei Liujia became poor again, he would have a thin face in front of his son. 17 fairy mountains, 17 mountain owners, are the closest to the temple of heaven except the Lord of the blessed land. There are 17 lords of the mountain, and there are only 6 lords of the blessed land. Their status is more detached. It is a title that can only be obtained by Yanxian, who has made a great contribution to the prince. It is also hereditary. Within half a day, Jian Wushuang and others came to the heavenly palace at the center of Damiantion. On the occasion of the vastness of the clouds, an imposing heavenly gate sits amidst the clouds and stands majestic. At this moment, there are no fewer than hundreds of figures like the sun and stars, falling outside the heavenly palace. Surrounded by their respective subordinates, dozens of palatial physiques marched forward. As soon as Wei Liujia saw them, he was unconsciously short and wanted to avoid them. But the more he hid, the more he was discovered. Among the more than 10 Daohua noble figures, the middle-aged Yan Xian, the richest man, could see Wei Liujia at a glance. Yo, it turned out to be Wei Xindi. It didn't happen in 1 year. It seems that there was some chance. The rich state Yanxian dragged his tone and walked over with a character. Despite the possession of the Emperor Zhongdan pills given to him by Jian Wushuang, Wei Liujia still consciously dwarves and looks reddish. Chapter 48-29. That rich state Yanxian is obviously also one of the owners of the 17 mountains. A pair of small eyes shining with fine light kept looking at his clothes, and he said the previous words. The clothing worn by Wei Liujia at the moment was also given to him by Jian Wushuang. This pair of lacy mountain-studded long dresses was given to Jian Wushuang by the young emperor and emperor. Each silk thread cost countless embroidered empresses, and was also a rare treasure. He was handed over to Wei Liujia. Fu State Yanxian also saw the extraordinary clothes on his body, his eyes dripping. Wei Xindi, why are the real swords that you often wear around you missing? Wouldn't it be for the sake of buying this outfit and sell it? As his voice fell, more than a dozen other Dao Guigui figures laughed and were very lively. Wei Liujia's complexion turned red and he had to rush forward to theory. But Jian Wushuang beside him pulled him, and his voice was imperceptible. Ning barking at the dog? Boy, what are you saying? Jian Wushuang's voice was not deliberately hidden, and it naturally passed into his ears, making Fu Yan Yanxian's face change. Wei Liujia was inexplicably reassured, and his state of mind also changed unconsciously. Facing the rich state Yanxian who rushed over, he went up without fear. Wei Liujia, get away from this seat, I'm going to destroy the kid's origin. Fu State Yanxian said angrily. Wei Liujia heard the words and slowly raised the corner of his mouth. Ding Chunshan, has Lao Tzu always been too kind, so that you have been riding on Lao Tzu's head and shit? Don't forget that Lao Tzu is also a mountain owner. Rich State Yanxian froze down, looking at Wei Liujia, who could not believe it, changed the aura. There was a moment of silence outside the Tiangong. A good mountain owner, said Fu Yanyan, who responded with a sneer. How dare you have done a great contribution for you, the mountain owner, for the entire Dimitri. I'm afraid I can't even afford the confession from the DPRK's position. Do you care how much I have contributed? Even if Laozi lay down and sleeps every day, that is the mountain owner, Wei Liujia also sneered. How do I take off my shoes and rub my legs? As long as you can press me, let alone rub your legs for your slippers, even if you lick the soles of this seat. Fu State Yanxian coldly said, if you are not good for me, then please remove the mountain automatically. How about the position of the Lord and running 3 circles around the Tiangong with bare ass? Lao should answer. Glancing at him, Wei Liujia turned and strode into the heavenly palace. After eating a boring loss, Fu Xin Yanxian, who knew that his face was lost, wanted to take him away. Wei Liujia, wait for this seat. In the vast cloud ladder, Wei Liujia's face flushed with excitement. His mother, I have never been as happy as I am today. The birdiness I have experienced before, I have returned it together today. It turned out to be so happy. After he finished speaking, looking at Jian Wushuang sincerely, today I was able to raise my eyebrows and exhale completely. but also thanks to the blessing of the adult, Weimo thanked me here. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. In fact, even without the details I gave you, you can still raise your eyebrows. You have always been stuck in your own opinion, but you never know how to deal with that kind of person is to return it ruthlessly. It is far less than the spirit and the spirit to crush him materially. Jian Wushuang said this calmly, and then stopped talking. And Wei Liujia was also pondering the meaning of his words, and awed him for a while. The ladder of 9,990, until the last step, the magnificent gate of the heavenly palace appeared. The magnificent and magnificent celestial palace in which the sun is located is full of majestic feelings. Compared with the heavenly palace in the northern celestial state of the late emperor's son, it is a little less tricky and ingenious. It was a bit majestic. This gave Jian Wushuang a bit of an illusion, and the correction of the sun was the real little emperor. The confession that is opened every other Chinese New Year is a law rectified by the sun after the Feast of the Heaven, which is intended to secure the mountain owner and the lord of the blessed land in order to prevent a second heart. The gate of the Tiangong Palace has long been opened, and a scent of incense floats out of the temple, calming the hearers. Guarded guards walked out of the hall and led them in sequence. In order to highlight the facade and style, every mountain owner who came to the Tiangong was followed by 5 or 6 top repair subordinates. Each of them was surrounded by a huge box, which was obviously a gift for the confession. Especially the wealthy Yanxian who confronted Wei Liujia outside the Tiangong Palace, followed by 8 top repaired subordinates, and the number of boxes in his arms was roughly 20 pieces. Instead, Wei Liujia was very bachelor, holding a slap-sized Yushu Liolizun seated. This scene was taken into account by Fu Yanxian, and he almost laughed out loud. He, who read countless treasures, naturally could see the Yushu Liolizun in Wei Liujia's hand at a glance, and even his body was not as good as the one he wore. I'm going to see how you compete with this seat, just wait for 3 rounds of Rao Tiangong with bare ass. Fu State Yanxian glared at him fiercely, and then took a seat. As long as these mountain masters entered the temple, Jian Wushuang realized that he was seated in the lower position of the throne, and he had already settled 6 old men, all of whom were quite mature, and they should be the masters of the blessed land. Sitting next to Wei Liujia, Jian Wushuang's eyes were always watching the empty throne. He was expecting that the figure with the bone-shaped armor disappearing would appear in the next time. Master, are you waiting for the emergence of the second emperor? Seeing the fluctuations in Jian Wushuang's eyes, Wei Liujia lowered his voice. After the morning bell strikes 3 times, the second emperor will move from Sendai to Tiangong. Jian Wushuang nodded, waited intently. When it seemed as though the bells ringing from afar, the entire Tiangong was suddenly silent, and all the mountain owners were sitting in danger, even the lords of the blessed land that closed their eyes and kept their eyes open. There are fairy cranes chirping outside the hall, while thousands of fairy clouds rise. Under the guidance of hundreds of cranes, a negative hand stood, dressed in a suit of the emperor, slowly walking into the heavenly palace. At this moment, the Lord of the 17 Mountains, the Lord of the 6 Blessed Lands, and a large number of Yanxian have been repaired, and they are all screaming. The courtiers meet the 2 emperors. Jian Wushuang looked up at his back. Compared with the previous feast in the heavenly court, the sun had a little more calmness that did not show the mountains and dew, as if everything was clear to the chest, giving people a sense of self-effacing. The feeling of, this is a very strong opponent, you can never guess his thoughts. Jian Wushuang doesn't even think that it was the real strength of the young master in the battle for the peach. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.